Hi friends, if you like watching my videos, then be sure to subscribe to the channel, put a like, and do not forget to click on the bell. Enjoy watching! Lightning flashed outside, while a drenched girl asked her boyfriend to marry her. She asked to stay with him for only 3 years, saying she'd be quiet as a mouse, and then she'd just disappear. The blonde didn't understand why he should accept the girl's proposal. The young lady wished to prevent being kicked out of the estate, so she decided to go to extreme measures. She informed the guy that she knew his main secret, but he did not believe her. To the rolls of thunder, the girl shared her knowledge, after which the man laughed and immediately proposed marriage. That's how the girl married Aslan Tordel. At the wedding, all the nobles present were dissatisfied because they thought that the Duke was good at everything, but it seems that he still had bad taste in women. The girls laughed at the guy's wife, as she did not have a noble family, and her beauty was not shining. Going to the wedding, the girl wondered what people would think of her when she married the Duke. Though it was a difficult question, but the girl already knew the answer since she had read the original story. It was all the plot of a novel she had read in a past life. When the heroine woke up in the body of a 10-year-old girl, she remembered what had happened in her previous life. At first, she thought it was just a memory that didn't apply to her, because her life was ordinary. Later, the girl's life began to take place according to the contents of the book she had read in her previous life. For her, everything became as if predetermined by fate. In the end, the heroine married Aslan for 3 years, just as in the original story she became the Duchess of Tordel. The way the novel's narrative was now going, the heroine could not change it in any way, as a fate that even her soul could not go against. The heroine simply accepted that she was destined to fall in love with the Duke. She did not care that this marriage was fictitious, because it was enough for the girl to simply be near the man, hoping that this happiness will never end. She believed in her feelings and considered them real, not invented by the author of the work. However, 3 years later, the day came. The Duke brought to his estate red-haired noblewoman, from which the heroine was horrified because she knew what would follow. The girl's name was Rosalin Peridot, who, according to the plot of the book, will have to get the heart of Aslan. The Duchess fainted and almost fell down the stairs, but still the man managed to save the girl. The girl knew that this day would come someday. Aslan Tordel was the main character of the story. According to the plot of the book, he met Rosalin Peridot and fell in love with her at first sight. Aslan, who has decided to spend the rest of his life with a noblewoman, is to make Rosalin his true wife after a 3-year contract marriage. The book did not tell the further fate of the heroine after she was kicked out of the estate, and no one ever knew what happened to her. The main characters of this story were Aslan and Rosalin, and the name of the heroine was not even mentioned in the novel, so she remained the Duchess of Tordel, the one who is unworthy of even mentioning. The girl came to her senses and saw the worried face of the Duke, who was about to run after the doctor. The heroine stopped him, saying that she was fine and shouldn't have been so worried. Aslan poured a glass of water from a carafe and held it out to his wife, saying that she needed a doctor after all, as she had suddenly fainted. The Duchess tried to calm the man down again, as she was just surprised that he had brought a strange girl into the house. The girl began to apologize for spoiling the atmosphere for the guest, and she should have greeted her properly. The Duke began to assure her that everything was all right, and it was his mistake, because he had brought the guest without prior warning. Rosalin was a distant relative of the Duke, and when they met, he felt sorry for her. But even without the man's explanation, the Duchess already knew everything, as it was described in detail in the novel. The heroine, Rosalin Peridot, was orphaned because of an accident, after which she was going to be sold to a rich old man for debts. Aslan was a distant relative who met her by chance and felt pity for her. Because of her deplorable situation, the Duke promised the girl to be her guardian and bring her into his house. Aslan began to say that Rosalin would not be here for long, and starting from this social season, they would find her a worthy groom. She would be able to meet a great partner in person and start a new life before next spring. In the end, the Duke asked his wife that Rosalin could stay at their estate for only 1 year. The girl realized that even if she kicked the guest out, nothing would change. No matter how hard she tried to deviate from the original, in the end, everything would be exactly as in the original story. A lot changed over the next week. Rosalin sat in the kitchen with her friends, discussing recent gifts. The girls began to envy her elegance, saying that she looked like the mistress of the manor. Rosalin got a little embarrassed and began to say that she was already the mistress of the house, and it wasn't worth changing anything. Suddenly the girl jumped up, for she saw the Duchess of Tordel approaching, while the others looked at the mistress of the house with contempt. To the girl, this coldness in her gaze was well known. For the past 3 years, in spite of all her efforts, they had never accepted the Duchess. What heroine couldn't get, even after 3 years of hard work, Rosalin got in just a week. Rosalin began to ask the girl how she was feeling, saying that she had wanted to check on her after she had fainted, but she had been told that the Duchess was ill, so she hadn't been able to visit her. Rosalin became interested in one question, so she took the girl by the hand and led her to a more private place to talk. The matter was that the girl had heard from the court ladies strange rumours about the Duchess, as if Aslan had forcibly kidnapped her and forced her to marry. Rosalin could not simply believe these tales, for Aslan did not look like such a terrible man. The girl was occupied with this question for a very long time, and she could not wait to find out the truth. The heroine wanted to refute the rumours, but then she began to remember the words of many people. One of them said that Aslan Tordel was the cruelest man in the world because he tried to kidnap a man's daughter for the sake of marriage. The noblewomen didn't understand what the Duke was insisting on the marriage for, which even the bride's family was against. No one knew what was going on, but everyone was sure that Aslan Tordel was making a huge mistake. Once in the study, Aslan asked heroine if this was what she desired. Did she wish to marry him and become the Duchess of Tordel, so that her family could not get her? The girl recoiled from the memory, saying that Aslan was a very nice man and shouldn't believe ridiculous rumours. Aslan Tordel was the sole heir to the historic Tordel family, a young duke with wealth, power, and even good looks. For a man who had no flaws, the Duchess was the first of them. Knowing all this, the girl simply had no options to escape from the Larrestein family. It all started when heroine was 10 years old. At that time, the girl was returning home after shopping, when suddenly she was jumped by an angry 3 horses. Fortunately, she escaped with only a few scratches. The woman climbed out of the carriage, tears in her eyes. In a fit of madness, began to embrace the girl, rejoicing that her daughter Helena was still alive. The coachman ran up and began to convince the woman that her daughter was long dead and it was not worth frightening passers-by. The man pushed the distraught woman into the carriage and took another close look at the girl. The coachman took her by the face and scrutinized her, for as it turned out, she looked most like the late Helena. He asked her about her parents, her age, and where she lived, obviously thinking of something. That same night, heroine was kidnapped. In the middle of the night, a group of thieves broke into the house and took the girl away from her father and mother. From that day on, she became Helena Larrestein. For the sake of the lady who had gone mad over her dead daughter, the Count gave her a heroine as a replacement. The Count told her that if the girl did well as Helena, she could live her life as a noblewoman, but if she failed like the previous 2, she would simply die. The maids of the manor whispered that the Earl was too kind to do such a thing for his crazy wife. He had no choice, because he did not want to lose his wife's inheritance, so he had to please her in everything. The girl did not like this coincidence. She was not Helena, but Rila Violet. The girl thought that when Mrs. Larrestein died, she would become unnecessary and be sent away, and then she could go back to her old life. A long time passed, and the Countess passed away, but Count Lorestan would not let her go. As it turned out, the woman had managed to make a will, which said that all her property goes to her daughter, and until she becomes an adult, no one has the right to touch her inheritance. The Count was furious as soon as he learned this, so he decided to just kill the girl until she gets married. The man who read the will asked the Count not to get too excited, for there was one more condition. If Helena died before she was of age, the entire inheritance must be donated to God. The Count was a little desperate, but there was nothing to be done, so he ordered the girl to be locked up in the attic until she came of age. The heroine was locked in the attic and treated even worse than a servant. It was very hard for her, but she could no longer pretend to be someone else. She was finally able to feel relief, but it didn't last long. After the death of her mistress, the Count's mistress immediately became his second wife. In this family, there was also Glock, the Count's illegitimate son, who turned the girl's life into hell. One day, the young man ordered Heroine to clean his room, and if she got tired, she could rest there for a while. Glock's mother walked in at that very moment and began to scold him, for she had ordered him not to molest this girl. The Count's new wife was worried that Helena would cause their son to get on the wrong track, so they had to get rid of her. The man asked to be patient a little longer, as he would soon get things sorted out. To show that Helena is still alive, sometimes Heroine was forced to take part in social events. At one of these, the girl met the Duke. It was the first time she had met such a handsome man. Aslan Tordel introduced himself, from which the thought arose in the heroine's mind that she had already heard this name somewhere. Helena had helped return the Duke his favourite handkerchief, so the man wanted to thank her. The girl said she didn't need anything, but the Duke insisted that even if she had everything now, she could still say what she wanted later. The man took a cufflink off his shirt and handed it to Helena, saying that if the girl had a request for him, she should come to the Tordel mansion and show it to her. At night, in her attic, Helena kept trying to remember where she had heard Aslan's name. Suddenly it dawned on the girl that this name belonged to the main character of the novel. Moreover, the name of the Duchess coincided with the name of the heroine. The girl did not believe in coincidences, because she could not be a duchess. Besides, she would never meet the man again. She decided to keep the cufflink as a souvenir, but before doing so, hide it well. At that moment, Glock came into Helena's room. He began to remind the girl that his mother was going to marry her off to a dying old man, so she should have lived with a young man than be sold to a nasty old man. Glock slapped Heroine, telling her that she shouldn't act so cold towards him. The young man began to ask if Helena was wondering where her real parents were. The girl jumped up, wanting to know something about her family. Glock said that the girl's parents came to their estate to find her, but the Count ordered to kill them before anything happened. But still, Helena's parents managed to escape. The heroine in hysterics tried to find out from the young man where her real family is now, but he wanted from the girl a favour for information. Glock said that if he was in a good mood, he could find them in secret from the Count. Helena had to endure to see her parents again. The girl began to remember the days she spent in her ancestral home. Her parents said that Helena should not hold back if someone offends her. The heroine grabbed a candlestick and hit Glock's head with all her might. The man fell into a pool of blood that was getting bigger by the minute. The girl urgently needed to escape to a place where her family couldn't get her. She remembered Aslan's words that if she had a request for him, she could come to his mansion. Helena managed to get to the Duke's mansion, from which he was greatly surprised, as the girl came to him soaked to the skin. Aslan did not know what the matter was, so first he asked the heroine to change into dry clothes, after which he would listen to her. The girl took a hot bath with her favourite lilac scent, and then put on a beautiful outfit. Helena didn't understand how the Duke had clothes in her size, since he didn't have a wife or sisters. Now they could talk normally, and finally the girl could tell what she had come to the Duke for late at night. The girl fell on her knees and begged Aslan to marry her. If she died unmarried, all the property would go to her father, but if the Count tried to kill her while she was married, all the inheritance would go to her husband. The Count wondered why he should accept the offer. The girl spoke of her inheritance, which she would receive as soon as she was of age. The man was not the kind of man who needed property, saying that the Duchy of Tordel was not poor. At that moment, Helena remembered that the Duchess from the novel had threatened Aslan and forced him to marry her for 3 years, all because Helena had learned Aslan's secret. That's how they became spouses a few years ago. In the present day, Herzog was telling Rosalin that the marriage to Helena was arranged. At the girl's request, they agreed that they would live as spouses for 3 years. Rosalin was uncomfortable to hear such a thing. Aslan assured her that their contract did not contain a word about love, because they simply agreed not to bother each other for a few years. This conversation made Helena feel very bad. She knew it would be so, as an arranged marriage could not be desired. And yes, Helena and Aslan were not on good terms in the affair. There was no room for love. The girl began to think back to the days when the Duke had been kind to her. One day, a man had prepared a whole garden of lilacs as a wedding present. He thought it was hard for heroine to live in an unfamiliar place, so now she had a place to relax. Aslan said that it was thanks to the girl that he recognized the beauty of these flowers. Though Aslan's attitude towards heroine was milder, her reputation was still as terrible as in the novel. Everyone laughed at her, saying that she never studied and didn't know even the banal rules of etiquette. Despite all this, the Duke cared for her and supported her in every possible way, so a futile hope was born in her. Phrases from the novel and the same situation. In the end, everything happened exactly as it was written in the book, as if Helena is trapped in a fate that is already predetermined. The Duchess could not withstand the flood of emotions and fainted again. Fortunately, there was a servant girl nearby and helped the girl. When the heroine lived with the Larrestein family, her body had weakened greatly due to the constant stress and abuse. Helena lay on the bed and couldn't hear anything because of the ringing in her ears. The Duke sat with red eyes, changing his wife's wet towels, wishing she would wake up sooner. The man ordered everyone to go out and let no one in, so as not to disturb the lady's rest. The maid tried to say that Lady Rosalin had come to visit the girl, but the man was not interested in her. Aslan took Helena's hand, telling her that every time she fainted, he didn't know what to do. Disgruntled, Rosalin asked the maid if she had accurately reported her arrival. The maid confirmed that the Duke had ordered no one to be admitted, and then the girl was very sad and went away from the Duchess's room. Rosalin did not understand why the man was so worried about Helena. After all, he himself said that they married not for love. The girl thought that the 3-year contract would soon end and the marriage would be over, and the man would no longer have to be bound to someone who could not properly play the role of Duchess. All the ladies of the court said that Rosalin was far more suited to the role. The ladies believed that because of such a wife, Duke Tordel is shrouded in bad rumours, and under the pretext of poor health, his wife almost does not appear in high society. Looking at the fact that after 3 years Helena still had not had a child, it was obvious that their marriage was a sham. Aslan was too kind, so he just couldn't turn his back on the poor girl. Rosalin thought that if she kept acting, Helena's place could be hers. When the Duchess woke up, the maid told her about Aslan's experiences over the past few days. The maid said that the Duke was with heroine all the time, but had recently come out because Lady Rosalin had something important to tell him. Helena began to guess why she was sick. She hated to admit that it was time to leave. Just the next day, the girl was due to have a birthday party. Once, when Aslan found out that nobody congratulates heroine on her real birthday, he promised that he would always do it. The girl wanted to spend this day with her husband for the last time, allowing herself to be a little selfish. Helena asked the maid to help her wash and change her clothes, because she urgently needed to go to Aslan. The girl was sure she didn't have much time left. The girl went to his room, but there was no one in it. Only she was about to leave a note, when suddenly Aslan's carriage showed up in the courtyard of the manor. The sight of the man being happy with Rosalin greatly disturbed the heroine. The Duke was interested in Rosalin's story, so they went to dinner together to hear the rest of it. Helena was sitting in her room applying makeup when she was informed that the Duke was not dining with her. The girl asked to be told that everything was fine and not to worry about her. Helena thought that Rosalina was beautiful. With her red hair and green eyes, it was as if she was made for Aslan. That's why she was the protagonist of the novel. Having met the heroine in the corridor, Rosalina began to inquire about the girl's health. She was sorry that Helena had not been able to attend last night's ball, because it had been fun. Aslan had to go alone because the girl was ill, so Rosalin asked if she could replace his wife and keep him company. The Duke agreed happily, and she had a wonderful time. Aslan thanked Rosalin for coming with him and gave her a new dress. Just today they went to pick it out. Helena felt bad because the Duke had forgotten about the heroine's birthday. In the novel, Rosalina also quickly became close to Aslan. The girl began to say that she wished to rest alone today, since her body was still not strong. In Helena's opinion, kind Aslan only took pity on her, so he promised her a lot. She could not blame him for forgetting his promise. It was normal for a secondary character to be forgotten as soon as the main one appeared. Watching how much fun the Duke was having with Rosalin, the girl began to realize that the man had not belonged to her from the beginning, and now it was time for her to leave. The Duke leaned over to Rosalin's ear, telling her that he had entertained her enough already, so she should give him the information she had promised. Helena thought this was a good day to leave for good. Today was her birthday, and the day their contracted marriage would end. Aslan was too polite. He wouldn't be the first to ask Helena to leave. Because of that, it was better if she bid him farewell herself. Helena dressed up in a luxurious outfit and went to see the Duke. As soon as Aslan saw his wife, he immediately left the important letter and spoke to her. The man was very busy yesterday and came home when the girl was already asleep. The heroine knew that Aslan had a lot of things to do, but still she wanted to talk to him. At that moment, the girl asked if the Duke remembered how they had signed the marriage contract at this very spot. Helena told him that today was the day of her coming of age, which meant that their contract had come to an end. A worried butler came running into the room with important news, but Aslan chased him away as he was busy talking to his wife. The girl asked not to worry, for she had come to say goodbye. The Duke was shocked by Helena's words, making him unable to say a word. Helena thanked the man for everything, saying that their contract was over and she would leave the mansion today. Aslan jumped up and began to question the girl about what had happened, and if he had offended her in any way, he promised to make things right. The Duchess maintained that nothing of the kind had happened. The man was very kind to her all this time, and she sincerely wished him happiness. At the moment when the girl was about to leave, Rosalin appeared, who began to hurry the man so that they would not be late for the event. Aslan began to persuade Helena to stay at the manor for a while longer, and they would definitely continue their conversation. The man promised that if the girl was not satisfied with something, he would fix everything, but first she should wait a little longer. That's how love ended for the heroine. It didn't take long to prepare for departure, for Helena didn't have much luggage. She was worried that Aslan might misunderstand everything, so she left him a letter. The heroine took the suitcases and headed for the exit. The maid asked to tell her where she was going, but the maid was unwilling to say so. Helena boarded the train and set off on her journey. According to the information received, Aslan arrived at the old house, in which everything was turned upside down. Rosalin did not understand what was happening, because she definitely thought that the right person was here. The footsteps showed that the man had left the place quite recently. The first thing the Duke did when he married Helena 3 years ago was to send men to destroy the Laurestine family. It was easy for him to ruin Count Laurestine, who was trying to stretch his hands into the Tordal family's railroad business with the help of his daughter. After Count Laurestine died after going on a bender, his mistress Marissa and son Glock ran away like rats. After 3 years of pursuit, their tracks were spotted in Baron Feridod's territory. It was rumoured that Marissa had seduced the Baron and spent all his wealth. Having lost everything, the Baron angrily killed Marissa and committed suicide, and Glock apparently escaped again. The Duke's men have not yet been able to find out where he went, but there were rumours that the only daughter of Baron Feridod was Glock's lover. The young man escaped, and Rosalin Feridod was sold for her father's debts. Aslan had to get close to her, and if rumours spread that he had paid all of Rosalin's debts and moved her to his capital, Glock would try to get close to her again. Everything turned out as the Duke had planned. He brought the girl to the mansion, and they were able to track the location of Glock, who came to Rosalin Feridod. The man swore that he would never let the young man go again, and then ordered everyone to look for him. He wanted revenge on everyone who had ever wronged Helena. Some time later, Helena arrived in Ellowood, a small and humble harbour village, the place where her real family lived. Thanks to Aslan, the heroine exchanged letters with her parents all these 3 years. If it turned out that the girl was not Helena Laurestine, but an ordinary commoner, Aslan would get into trouble, so the parents went to live in a remote village. An elderly woman was standing outside the spacious house, picking apples with her son. Seeing her daughter, the woman immediately rushed to embrace her, with tears in her eyes. The girl's father also came running at the noise, after which the whole family was reunited. Helena began to apologize for not visiting her family for so long. At this time, a discouraged Aslan was reading a letter left by his wife before she left. With a murderous look, The Duke began to ask why the servant had not stopped the girl. The butler assured him that he had tried to dissuade Helena, telling her that the man would be back soon, but she had left anyway. Aslan realized it was a mistake. He should not have left his wife. The man could not understand why the Duchess had decided that he was going to marry Rosalin. Although at Helena's request, they had agreed that they would live as spouses for 3 years, but still, he did not want to part with her. The Duke began to realize that the girl had rather heard that conversation in the garden. There was a high probability that Glock would meet Rosalin, so it was necessary to hide that Helena was dear to him. After learning the girl's true situation, Glock could intimidate Helena, considering it her weakness. Because of this, Aslan had to fool the guy by telling everything to Rosalin Feridot. The man tore up the letter, in anger, thinking that his wife had gone to Elowood anyway. The Duke ordered everyone not involved in Glock's capture to go to the settlement to protect the girl. Aslan quickly left the room and headed for the exit of the manor as he suddenly stopped in front of the window, remembering the ring. He wanted to give Helena that gift after he had finally dealt with her past. The ring was to signify the end of the arranged marriage and the beginning of the real one. From the very beginning, the Duke never thought of letting the girl go. 4 years ago, Aslan had a dream in which he was older than he is now, and there he fell in love with a girl. She, using his secret, forces the man to marry, after which, feeling betrayed, he was forced to live in marriage for 3 years. In a dream, 3 years later, the girl leaves the Duke, from which he suffers, unable to forget her. In the end, he died alone. Although it was only a dream, but was so realistic, the man considered it prophetic. In that dream, Aslan clearly heard the girl's name and immediately searched for Helena Larestein. At one ball, the Duke was finally convinced that a girl with that name really existed. She was in poor health, so she did not often appear in society. She was a girl whose name almost no one knew. With her blonde hair and elegant physique, Helena looked just like she did to Aslan. The man assumed that if the dream was indeed a dream, the girl could also know about it, so he dropped the handkerchief and waited for the heroine's actions. Looking at the girl, all the feelings that the Duke had experienced in the dream came in a wave, and the moment he had first seen Helena in his dream, his heart had been pounding just as frantically. The man couldn't let her go, so he prepared a beautiful place for her. When Aslan learned that Helena Larestein really existed, he became obsessed with his dreams. The outfit she wore in his dream, her scent, her favourite flowers, he began to collect everything that was somehow connected to her, and waited for the real Helena Larestein. And then one day she came, looking much younger than she had in the man's dream. She was far more beautiful than the Helena of his dreams. For the 3rd time, we are reminded of the scene when the girl asked Aslan to marry him. The man asked the girl to get up from the cold floor, for she had been caught in a downpour. Helena was not comfortable forcing such a kind man into marriage, so she decided to just beg him to do it. The girl begged for help, saying that Count Laurestine had kidnapped her and that her name was really Rila Violet. The Count said he would kill the girl if she didn't pretend to be his dead daughter. Aslan heard this for the first time, since Helena had never told him about herself in his dream. The heroine merely returned the handkerchief to the man, and she had already begun to excuse herself about the marriage. Because of this, she thought the man was angry with her. The Duke concluded that Helena had proposed this marriage in his dream for the same reason. He didn't hate her for betraying his love and spinning him around using weaknesses. But still, love overrode the hatred and the feeling of betrayal. Aslan had never been curious about the girl's real situation until the day she left him. So this time, the man was determined not to repeat the same mistake he had always made in his dreams. The Duke held out a handkerchief to the girl, asking her to wipe her tears, saying that he would do as Helena wished. The man wondered what Helena would do if he didn't honour her request. The girl said that she would sell the shawl given by the Duke and try to find her family. The girl was very sincere compared to the Helena from the dream. In Aslan's opinion, it could be because they had met a few years earlier. The man began to assure the heroine that it would be safer for her to stay at his estate, and if she wished to meet her parents, he would help her. The Duke said he couldn't stay away after hearing the girl's story, for he wasn't that insensitive. Helena stammered, as she thought that the man couldn't kick her out the door just because of pity. From the beginning, their relationship was different from the dream. A relationship in which they loved each other without any hatred and misunderstanding. So this time, Aslan was not sorry to lose the girl. The action returns to the present time, in which all the servants of the Duke's estate are scrambling to find things for Aslan's journey. One of the maids told Rosalin that Helena had left alone, and now the Duke was going to follow her. The girl did not understand what the man was up to, as his marriage contract had long since come to an end. The maid thought that Aslan was still very much worried, since Helena had not recovered completely. Rosalin began to feel very uneasy, for it seemed to her that Aslan did not care for this marriage at all. She could not afford to have these two meet again. The girl began to say that she would miss him if the Duke left, so she should have gone with him. Rosalin tried to reassure herself that Helena had left suddenly, and Aslan might just be confused. The girl had to show the man who really cared for him. At Helena's house, the girl's parents had set up a table full of food to celebrate their daughter's return. The girl's brother began to boast of Helena's beauty, saying that apparently the Duke had taken good care of her. The heroine's father said that Aslan also helped them well, because all these years they did not need anything. Although it was extremely difficult for them on the run, but as soon as the girl married, their life got better. Helena nostalgically began to say that Aslan was really a very merciful man, and they all owed him a great debt for his kindness. The girl's brother began to remember the Duke's letters, in which he always addressed "dear mother-in-law, father-in-law," which made the heroine very uncomfortable. It even seemed to him that his parents really had a son-in-law. His father excused himself, saying that they were just grateful to the man for his kindness. To be honest, Helena's brother was beginning to think that she would not return to them, because in every letter she wrote only about Aslan, as if she were really in love with him. The girl's parents closed the mouth of the chatty young man and began to calm Helena, saying that even if she had problems with the Duke, it was all right, because she had them, people who would always help her and support her. The heroine said that they didn't have any problems, it was just that their contract was over and she came back as she didn't want to disturb Aslan. Helena had been unrequitedly in love with the Duke for 3 years, and she was sad that he must have forgotten about her, spending time with Rosalin. The girl jumped up and ran outside, saying that she still needed to sort out her luggage. The heroine's brother began to suspect that the girl left home having quarrelled with Aslan, but his parents again closed his mouth. Aslan's butler informed the Duke that he had already booked a train to Eris, and he should get off at the station and head towards Ellerwood. Rosalin appeared at that moment and heard that the man was going on a trip, so she offered to go with him, so that he would not be bored on the trip. Aslan looked coldly at the girl and headed for the exit, saying that she didn't have a ticket and probably wouldn't be able to go. The Duke ordered Lady Ferrido to be escorted inside and then to gather her luggage for the trip. In her room, Rosalin angrily asked the maid when her master would return. The girl knew nothing, for Aslan had left without saying anything. He was supposed to follow Helena, so they could most likely return when they solved all the girl's affairs. Seeing the hundreds of suitcases of clothes, Rosalin grinned, saying that she needed new dresses. The money Aslan had given her had not run out yet, so she could use it as she wished. Rosalin simply could not meet a man tired after a trip in an unsightly outfit, which she had already worn. That very night, she went to the store and bought herself a lovely dress. As Rosalin was on her way home, someone was watching her intently from outside. A few moments later, she was attacked and horrified. Seeing Glock Lorestian in front of her, Rosalin was stunned. The young man shared rumours that the girl had allegedly revealed his location to Duke Tordell. The boy could not understand why she had done that, and whether she really loved him. Rosalin pushed Glock away and became indignant, because when her father died and she was sold, the young man simply ran away, leaving her all alone. The young man began to admit his mistake, saying he was sorry, but there was nothing he could do about the situation. But still, Glock could not forgive the girl, since she had ratted him out to Duke Tordell. It seemed to the young man that the man treated her well, because she was wearing a lot of jewellery with a high value. Rosalin ordered not to touch her, and immediately received a slap. In Glock's opinion, having become the Duke's mistress, the girl thought a lot of herself. Rosalin should not forget that the young man could at any moment reveal her main secret. Rosalin was shocked, arrogant threat, and she really began to fear the unexpected consequences. The action moves back 2 years to the land of the Feridot family. Rosalin began to get tired of the monotonous rural life as he suddenly appeared, a new stable boy, who was hired by her father not so long ago. This beautiful man won the girl's heart with his kindness and character. While Rosalin's father was busy gambling, he completely forgot about his daughter. Over time, the girl's relationship with Glock became much more serious, and after a while she found out that she was pregnant. Rosalin did not know what to do, because if her father found out about it, there would be serious consequences. Glock calmed the girl and told her to wait, assuring her that he would take full responsibility. But when her father, deprived of his property, stabbed Marissa to death, the young man, frightened, ran away. Soon her father committed suicide, and she lost her child. And so in front of her, sold for her father's debts, appeared Aslan, who was ready to pay everything, only on one condition. If Glock would one day come to Rosalin, she was obliged to give it to the Duke. The man was afraid that the young man could be dangerous and could harm those around him. A young, handsome Duke who is also kind and rich. His wife was often ill and too shy, so her reputation in society was not the best. Rosalin thought that she could easily replace her, and if they had a fake marriage, it was obvious that after Helena left, she could easily take her place. Presently, Glock asked Rosalin if she was sure the Duke would love her if he found out about her dark past. The young man believed that no one would be happy with a girl who was pregnant by another. The girl in a burst of emotion slapped Glock, telling him not to dare to tell Aslan everything, otherwise he would definitely not live to see the morning. Rosalin ran to her room in a panic, then began to think what she should do, because if Glock told the Duke about her past, it would be very bad. On the other hand, Aslan could most likely kill him as soon as he found him. The man was trying to protect her, so he had to take it any way he could. The girl still did not understand Aslan's true feelings, so she did not know what to do now. At that time, a group of the Duke's riders were coming from the heiress station to Helena's house. The girl could be frightened if armed men came to her at such an early hour, so Aslan ordered everyone to stay where they were. As she approached the house, the Duke noticed a thin hand opening the shutters of the windows, and at this time hid himself to just observe. The girl was enjoying the pleasant morning breeze that brought freshness to her room. Aslan couldn't even move as he overheard Helena asking her father to make breakfast. The man didn't know that the girl could be so smiling, for it seemed to him that in the duchy she was always sad and unsure of herself. She ran out into the courtyard with her brother in a hurry, filled with happiness with every second spent in her native land. Aslan felt uneasy, as Helena had never smiled so brightly in front of him. It seemed to the Duke that the girl was much happier now than when she lived next to him. The man was unsure if he dared ask Helena to come back when she was so happy. A worried Rosalin sat on her bed, thinking that when Aslan returned from his journey, she would be able to find out how he felt about her. If he came back with the Duchess, it meant he still had feelings for her, and if he was alone, he had fallen in love with her. The brother and sister were collecting plants when suddenly they heard a rustling from behind a tree, and a man came out to them. The girl thought it was Aslan, but in fact the mysterious stranger was Hans, the local postal worker. Helena felt a little sad, for she might never see the Duke again. The concerned brother asked Hans not to look at his sister, since she was married. The girl asked not to worry, for she was indeed married, but recently divorced. These words hit the Duke, who was standing not far behind the tree, hard. It seemed to Helena that it was finally time to stop thinking about Aslan. He had been too kind to her all these 3 years. It was time to stop fooling herself and getting her hopes up. The letter carrier began to apologize, but the girl assured that she felt better on the contrary. The young man said goodbye and went about his business. It was chilly outside, so the girl's mother called her inside, for she was afraid that her beloved daughter would catch a cold. Watching all this, Aslan came to the conclusion that his wife only suffered beside him. In her dreams, Helena had no interest in anyone but the Duke. She never talked about her family, hobbies, or her friends. The girl was forever following him around and trying to win the man's love. Aslan thought Helena would be happier if he was kinder to her than he was in the dream, showing his feelings. However, when he never asked the girl if she was happy and if she wanted to return to her birth family. Though it was obvious that living under someone else's name, leaning on her husband, would not make anyone happy. The saddened Duke returned to his men. Getting on his horse, he ordered them to stay in the settlement and protect Helena, and if anything happened, to report to him personally at once, and he would join them as soon as he had finished one thing. Rosalin was roused by the news that the Duke was returning to the manor. The maid was unhappy that her master was returning alone for some reason. Rosalin ran to meet the Duke, thinking that his relationship with Helena was over long ago. Aslan had to give his wife back her real name first, and he could not allow her to be separated from her family, and for that he had to hurry with Glock's Pima. Rosalin ran up to the man, and taking his hand began to tell of her worries, in which she thought the Duke would return with several battle wounds. According to the girl, Helena, on the pretext of her health, asked her to take care of the man. Aslan didn't know what she was talking about, but she went on about how the Duchess had asked her to take care of him, both at the ball and on other days. Helena even said goodbye, wishing her luck, and if she really loved the man even a little, she would never have said that. The Duke began to remember that the day after the ball was Helena's birthday. She had promised that every year they would spend that day together. The man began to speculate as to the reason she might have given him to Rosalin to fall in love with the girl. Remembering walking with Rosalin, the Duke reminded her that he had spoken of his busyness, and that she had better go shopping in town herself, for he had business with Helena. The girl began to object, for she had met the Duchess on the way, and the latter had said she was not feeling well, so would rest alone. Rosalin wished that Aslan would spend the whole day with her if his plans were cancelled. The Duke was not pleased, for earlier the girl had said that she needed time to tell everything about Glock, so he took her to the ball, as Rosalin wished him to do. Aslan thought that he had had enough fun with the girl, and now she was obliged to tell the promised information. Presently, the Duke began to realise that he had made another fatal mistake. He began to ask the maid Jenna if she had been with Helena that day. She said yes, whereupon the man told her about his plans with the Duchess and how he had sent Lady Ferido to go shopping alone. He wondered if that was what had been relayed to the Duchess that day. The maid was surprised at his words, for she had heard that Aslan had gone to get new dresses for Rosalin, in gratitude for her being with him at the ball. The man was a little amused by these words, while the red-haired girl tried to justify herself. Aslan ordered her to stop, for in his opinion it was his fault, for he should not have been allowed to behave as he pleased. With a murderous look, the Duke informed Rosalin of the conclusion that apparently he had been too kind to her. Calling for the butler, Aslan ordered that Lady Ferido be sent to Amber's house, and that if Glock Lariston tried to approach her, he be seized immediately and sent to him. Besides, as soon as the young man was captured, they had to kick Rosalin out of the manor. Aslan had given a clear order not to allow this girl to go near his wife. Rosalin started to try to persuade the man not to do so, but the house staff grabbed her and took her to her room. At that moment, the guards remaining at Ellerwood sent the Duke a telegram. It said that Mr. Violet had left the village to buy antipyretics. Aslan remembered that his wife was in poor health and must have caught a cold when she left the house on a cold morning. It seemed to the man that the Duchess had a fever, so he wanted to send their best healer to Ellerwood, but on the other hand, it would be strange if he just showed up like that, so Aslan was going to go there with the doctor. Without thinking long, the Duke ordered the packing for the trip. The butler was worried about the man as he had travelled all night to the manor, so he should have at least eaten. Aslan had no intention of resting, saying he would sleep on the train, for the Duchess's health was paramount. Helena was lying in her bed, suffering from a low fever. The girl's mother told her off, for she had told her to dress warmer on that chilly day. Her father brought Helena some cold medicine with strawberry flavour, as the girl liked it, so he asked her to drink it and get a good night's sleep. The heroine asked not to worry about her, because she would be fine. The girl's parents were upset, because they thought that she was unhappy without them. Helena refuted their opinion, saying that Aslan always took good care of her. Whenever she was sick, the Duke was always there for her. Even the time she fainted, She thought it was Jenna who was watching over her. However, as she was later informed, Aslan never left her side for a second. The girl became very sad, and she began to convince herself that she simply could not miss her husband. The train was about to leave, so the Duke hurried the doctor, for he could hardly walk. At this time, a suspicious-looking man in a black mask was watching them from the side. He had heard that Aslan was now completely unguarded, so this was his chance. The bandit harnessed the horses and rushed at Aslan. The doctor tried to save the man, but was not in time, and the Duke was struck down, leaving him with blood on his head. As soon as Aslan lost consciousness, he began to dream about his old dreams, in which Helena asked him to marry him, because she knew that the man was hiding from everyone. The Duke began to ask what he was hiding. The girl told him about the sad fate of his father, who was killed by the Duke's mother. Aslan disguised everything as if it were an accident and hid his mother in the convent. Helena had no choice, so she was not going to torture Aslan for long, saying that all she needed was 3 years of marriage. After that time, she promised to leave the man as if nothing had ever happened. Suddenly, Aslan woke up and his head began to ache. The butler was very happy to see the man awake, for Aslan had been hit by a carriage and badly maimed. The man tried to get up, but the doctor urgently stopped him, as the patient was not yet allowed to move. The Duke decided to find out more about the accident. The butler told him that the man was going to the station to go to his mistress. Aslan was surprised by his words, for he thought that the man was not even married, so he did not understand whom the man called mistress. Everyone present was shocked. Aslan was still surprised that all his acquaintances had grown up a lot, and he wanted to know what had happened. The butler nervously asked the doctor what was wrong with the Duke, to which he replied that he might have lost his last memories due to the shock. Without thinking long, the doctor asked Aslan to say how old he thought he was now. Aslan answered clearly that he was now, of course, about 20 years old. The butler became increasingly nervous, but still he decided to ask if the Duke remembered anything after 20. The man looked at him with complete incomprehension of what was happening. As soon as Aslan was allowed to walk, he was taken to show a painting that depicted the Duke with Helena. This girl looked to him like the one he had seen in his dreams. The man thought he had married her because of blackmail, so he decided to ask what was going on with his Tordell family's railroad business now. The butler took Aslan to his office, which was filled with thousands of business papers. They said that his campaign had taken over almost all the railroad lines. The business was growing much faster than the Duke had expected. The butler told him that the campaign had taken possession of many things, so the reputation of the business and the credibility of the Tordell family beyond their small country had increased. The Duke thought of the Machete family, who dreamed of a western branch, but then he saw an empty cigar box. Aslan was dissatisfied, for he had previously asked for weekly refills, but the butler informed him that he had not smoked in 3 years. Helena was in poor health, and if she smelled cigarettes, she might get worse. The Duke wondered why his wife was mentioned in every case. According to the paperwork, they just had an arranged marriage, and it said that the contract had long since expired. Aslan did not understand why he had married Helen at all, for she had an ordinary family and could not have made a duchess. The servants didn't know any details, as it was the man's personal decision. And then the Duke realised that it was better to treat the girl as a beloved wife than to show that he was threatening him. The butler offered to meet with Helena again, to help her bring back the Duke's memories. Aslan didn't think it made sense, because he had already gone to see her, but he'd come back with nothing, and it was clear he shouldn't have kept the heroine in his house. The servant tried to object that still the doctor said to communicate with those whom Aslan used to know, so that the memories would return. And then the Duke remembered the rumours that supposedly some girl used to stay in his house. Happy Rosalin was brought to the study, where the girl began to rejoice that Aslan had woken up after all. The smug Duke did not understand this thoughtfulness, for he had earlier ordered the girl to be sent to Amber's house and then kicked out of the estate. Rosalin began to worry whether the man had definitely lost his memory, but still, this was her best chance to win the Duke. The girl began to say that there had been some misunderstanding, for her former lover had recently contacted her, so she thought that the man had ordered such a thing, thinking that she might still have feelings for him. The Duke didn't understand why such a thing would make him in any way angry. A confused Rosalin said it was obvious, because they loved each other. She began to recall how Aslan had paid off all her debts and brought her to this mansion, and how everything with the Duchess was just a contract. According to her, the Duke told her that during those 3 years they just lived without interfering with each other. Aslan didn't want to admit it, but he still vaguely remembered the conversation. Rosalin went on to say that because her former lover could hurt her, Aslan had asked her to let him know if he came near. The girl recalled how the Duke had even tried to personally grab Glock. The Duke began to recall such a thing, for he really could have done something like that. The man was beginning to think that he really loved this girl. Rosalin had a pretty face, but there was one problem. Aslan had always thought that he would never get married, so he couldn't believe that he had to go to such immoral things. The Duke began to ask what he was wrong, because the girl still met in secret from him with Glock. Rosalin excused herself, saying that the young man had found her and threatened her, and that he had promised to spread dirty rumours about her, but she still managed to escape. Aslan asked Dalton if he could trust the girl's word. The butler did not know the details, but the reason the Duke was angry was because Lady Feridot was not treating Helena properly. According to Dalton, the Duke always put his wife first. It seemed to the man that he just had to please Helena, since she knew his weak spot. The Duke even had to leave the guards with the girl and go alone, probably so that the guards would make sure Helena didn't tell his secret. But it was still strange that Aslan had not immediately gotten rid of her, but had lived with her all these 3 years. There must have been some reason why he couldn't touch her. The Duke decided not to act rashly until the memories returned. The man didn't know if he had really met Rosalin, but he thought he would remember everything if he talked to her. After a while, Aslan told the girl that it would be better for her to stay by his side for the time being. He didn't remember everything about Rosalin yet, but the memories would come back if she was always near him. Helena's temperature was taken, and the thermometer showed a normal value. The whole family of the heroine began to celebrate the moment of her recovery. The girl's parents offered to organise a festive dinner and celebrate this case with something delicious. Suddenly, Helena's brother read the news about the accident at the central station. The heroine urgently decided to look too, because the incident happened not far from Aslan. The girl dropped a cup of tea, from which it shattered, as the newspaper said that the Duke had an accident. Aslan Tordel, the head of the Tordel business, had not left the house for several days. Probably he was badly hurt. Helena didn't understand how it was possible and what she should do now. The girl cried loudly from her emotions. The mother of the heroine decided to cheer up her daughter, saying that she needs to urgently go and check on her ex-husband. The girl did not think that this was possible, since she no longer had anything to do with the Duke. Her father had insisted, for Helena could have just come to visit the man. They had lived in a place for 3 years, and it was quite normal to worry about each other. At this time, Rosalin was telling the Duke about recent events, continuing just from the moment she put on the dress and went with the man to the ball. At that time, everyone said that the atmosphere at the ball had become more luxurious, because instead of the Duchess, Rosalin had come with Aslan. The Duke did not understand anything of the sort and doubted the girl's words a little. Rosalin continued to say that then the man ordered her not to deny herself anything while living in his house and gave her a lot of money. The girl clung to Aslan, saying that they used to spend a lot of time alone together and the man often worried about her. The man pushed Rosalin away, saying that he didn't remember anything like that, and he didn't feel that way even when he looked at her. This time was Rosalin's chance, until the man's memories returned. The Duchess was gone anyway, so Aslan wouldn't have her out the door if she fell in love with him. The girl would reassure the Duke, telling him that everything was fine, and there was no need to rush anywhere as she would always be there for him. Aslan couldn't understand why his tastes in women had changed so much, and why he had let such a girl get close to him. The man had never been interested in such a type, and if he had fallen in love, she would have been completely different. Simple and innocent, just like that girl in the portrait. The Duke decided not to think about it for now, and called Dalton to inquire about the culprit of the accident. Butler reported that the culprit was then wearing a mask as he ran away, so they were unable to identify him. Aslan came to the conclusion that the accident was most likely faked. Dalton added that since the Duke hasn't been out, rumours about his accident spread everywhere. Everyone started talking about how the man was suffering through a divorce because the mistress wasn't at the mansion right now. The Duke could not leave everything so easily, because the shares of his company could fall in value greatly. Rosalin took advantage of the moment and suggested to Aslan that he go out to lunch with her, for nothing could be better than to declare himself in good health by walking with a young girl. The man accepted the offer, saying it was just in time. In any case, it would soon become known that Aslan was divorcing his wife. He wanted to save himself the trouble by showing that he had a new girlfriend. Helena was about to board the train, but her father did not want to let her go alone because she might be kidnapped again. The girl's father assured her that everything would be fine, and if anyone recognized her, she would simply say that the man next to her was just carrying her luggage. They were still not allowed to reveal their true identities. Helena was worried that Aslan didn't care about her anymore, but she still couldn't stay in the shadows any longer. The girl was very worried about Aslan. She decided to just look at the Duke from afar and leave. Rosalin dressed up in a new luxurious dress and began to show herself in front of the Duke. The man suggested that she go to a jewellery store, because the girl should become more beautiful in jewellery that suits the outfit. In the streets of the city, people were surprised by the appearance of Duke Tordel, together with Rosalin Ferido. The man was sure that this would be enough to make the rumours of the accident finally disappear. Suddenly, in the middle of the crowd, Rosalin saw Helena standing in furtive clothing. Seeing Aslan together with the girl, the heroine felt very hurt again for some reason. The girl thought that most likely Aslan was not hurt, though he looked a little pale. Rosalin started to take the man away in a panic, not understanding why the Duchess was back again. The girl realised that if the Duke saw Helena, his memory might return. Rosalin had to do everything she could to keep them from crossing paths. She stumbled deliberately and began to say that her new shoes were a little stiff for her. Her ankle hurt and she couldn't seem to walk. The man took Rosalin in his arms, not worrying about what they would think of them, for they had come out just in time to show themselves to people. To make sure they were okay, the girl moved closer to Aslan's face and kissed him on the cheek. Everyone started talking about how good the couple was, thinking that they were really dating. Helena felt very sick and decided to go back to her home. Aslan was completely healthy, and one could not worry about him. The girl's father was very happy because he managed to buy waffles with strawberry filling. The girl took the man and led him away from that place, saying that it was cold there. Suddenly, Helena was called by her longtime maid, who was very happy that the girl had finally returned. The girl began to say that she wasn't coming back. She just had some business to attend to in the capital. The maid asked Helena to return to the mansion now, as the situation had become extremely urgent. From the conversation, the girl learned that Aslan had lost his memory and did not remember anything after 20 years, and Rosalin Ferido used it to become his lover. Helena thought that the Duke was on good terms with the girl, but the maid denied it, saying that it could not be so. Rosalin Ferido was an insolent girl and deceived Helena, and when Aslan found out about it, he was very angry and ordered to expel her. In addition, when the Duke heard that the girl was ill, he went to see her in a hurry, taking a healer with him, but had an accident. The heroine couldn't believe the maid's words, for she thought that Aslan was annoyed by their contract marriage. The maid mentioned the words of the doctor, who said that the Duke needed to communicate with people close to him to regain his memory. Helena had spent 3 years with the man together, so she was the one who was closest to him. The maid promised to take care of Ferido, while the heroine would try to meet with Aslan, trying to help him remember the past. Rosalin, while in the Duke's arms, began to ask if he was having a hard time. The man did not know a specific answer, because, in his opinion, earlier the girl was lighter. Rosalin didn't understand what before meant, but the man remembered that he often carried the girl in his arms, because she fainted almost every day because of her illness. At this point, the Duke began to remember that it was actually Helena. The man did not understand what this memory was, so he decided to think it over. The man asked the coachman to escort Rosalin to the mansion, saying that he had a lot to do, so he had to go to his office. In his office, Aslan began to think over the situation. Talking to Rosalin Feridor, he could not remember anything. Some scenes did come to mind, but they were unrelated to the girl. In those memories, he kept thinking of Helena Laristine. Suddenly, the butler informed the man that the Duchess had arrived. As soon as the girl walked in, Aslan was flooded with memories of asking her to marry him. The man's feelings and memories merged together. The man no longer realized when and what had happened. Everything in his thoughts had become very jumbled, and he began to have a headache. Helena began to worry about the Duke, asking him how he was feeling, which made him blush. Aslan pushed the girl away, and she turned pale at this behavior. In the Duke's memories, Helena threatened him and forced him to marry her after living together for 3 years. However, after looking into her eyes, the man began to feel that he loved her. Aslan began to ask what the Duchess was doing here, since their contract had long since ended. Helena wondered if the man remembered her, the one called Helena Laristine. The man was very surprised. Memories came flooding back to him. Next to Rosalin Feridor, he couldn't remember anything, but as soon as Helena looked at him, he had an epiphany. Aslanu wondered who this girl was. The heroine began to explain that she had heard about the Duke getting into an accident and losing his memory, and to get his memories back, he was told to communicate with close people from the past. Though they had a contractual relationship, but the girl felt she could help Aslan. The Duke couldn't hide his emotions because of his feelings. Aslan began to think only about how to hug and kiss the girl. He was beginning to think that he had gone crazy or hurt his head in that accident. Helena wanted to take the man by the shoulder, but he threw her hand aside. It was all very dangerous for the man. He couldn't reveal his weak spot because Helena was threatening him. He simply couldn't let the girl manipulate him again. With a murderous look, Aslan wondered from whom she had learned about the memory loss. In his opinion, the heroine came only because of rumors and expected to live at his expense. Helena cried, for she became very offended by these words, as she was very worried about the man. This girl threatened and used him. In addition, she was not enough, and she stole his heart. However, for some reason Aslan was very sad to see the girl's tears. His heart almost didn't beat as if it was about to stop. As soon as the Duke decided to touch the girl, the guard announced Lady Feridor's visit. Rosalin ran into the room and began to question the man about what was happening. Since the Duke had not yet recovered, the girl was worried that he would become ill while working, so they came to him. Next to Rosalin, the man's heart did not flutter. He became so calm, even though a few moments ago he thought that his end had come. Aslan's reaction made her realize that he hadn't fully regained his memory, so she had to make him kick Helena out and never see her again. Rosalin started to attack the girl, asking why she had come here, because Aslan had already said that their relationship was over long ago. According to her, Helena had been taking advantage of the Duke's kindness for 3 years, and now she had the nerve to come here. Rosalin was angry that the girl had missed the luxurious and beautiful life and was pestering Aslan again, using his emotions and feelings. The girl called Helena shameless and ordered her to get out and never come back. The heroine cried quietly and walked out the door, calling herself a total loser. She wondered what she had expected when she came to the Duke's estate. She was already beginning to think that Jenna had made a mistake, and there was nothing else tying her to the man besides a contract. Helena was bound only by paper for 3 years, during which time she did nothing but annoy him. The girl wiped away her tears and went to her ever-joyful father. She relayed to him a conversation with the Duke, in which he said that he was all right. The girl's father immediately realized that something was wrong, but he decided not to interfere for the time being. The girl began to think that Rosalin was really right, and she should no longer come to the Duke, having stopped constantly missing him. In the evening, after the examination, the doctor reported that the Duke had been moving around a lot and needed rest. Memories kept popping up in Aslan's mind after meeting Helena, so the man wondered if he had been happy with her. He couldn't imagine being able to live happily with someone after his mother had gone mad. That day, Aslan's mother kept saying that she had to do away with her husband. Then the Duke's mother lost her mind, and he had to lock her up in a convent and make her father's death look like an accident. Perhaps it was because of this that Aslan was not interested in girls, and lived completely immersed in work. Rosalin was worried about the man, for he had been asleep ever since they had returned to the manor. The doctor said that the Duke's brain and mind were beginning to recover, and perhaps if he slept well, his memories would return. Lady Feridot was uncomfortable with the thought that Aslan's memory had begun to return since his meeting with the Duchess. The man began to dream of Helen again. The girl was standing over the body of his mother, who had passed away in the convent. At the funeral, she cried even harder than he did, as if she had been very close to her. Although Helena was not the first beauty, but she was still very graceful and neat, beautiful even in her mourning clothes. Aslan held out a handkerchief to the girl and introduced himself, whereupon the girl said that he was not like his mother. The Duke assumed that he had fallen in love with this girl because of his feelings of loneliness after his mother's death. Sadness then, or loneliness, any excuse would do for him, for he did not want to think he wished to live with her. The Duke's wind blew in a strange direction, and his feelings for the girl were distorted and tainted by her threats. Helena infuriated him. He hurt her in every way he could to keep her from realizing that the man was in love with her. When the girl cried and begged Aslan, he felt satisfied. After rumors that the Duke proposed to Rosalin, Helena couldn't stand it and left him while he jumped off the cliff. Suddenly, the man woke up, believing he had fallen off the cliff as he missed Helena. Aslan didn't understand why he had gone to such lengths. It seemed like a normal dream, but the feelings in it were too realistic. The Duke began to think that the fact that the Duchess was not around had driven him to such despair. Now he wanted to find her and beg her to come back to him. Rosalin was starting to get nervous and was about to call the doctor, but the Duke stopped her, saying she didn't need to do that. A man was not allowed to show his weaknesses to anyone. Aslan grabbed the girl and hugged her tightly. Next to her, he didn't feel the pain of those memories. The man promised that as soon as he sorted out all the divorce papers with his ex-wife, he would propose to Rosalin. The girl was very happy and immediately agreed to it. Aslan didn't understand why he was so sincere with this Helena, but he couldn't let her twist him around anymore. The Duke was going to sever all ties with the girl to come to his senses. He firmly believed that if he married Rosalin, Helena would no longer appear in his life. Lady Feridot could not believe what was happening, as she was worried that Aslan would drive her away when he remembered everything. On the train, Helena overheard a conversation that said the Duke of Tordel was getting married again. The rumour was that Rosalin Feridot had contacted the best wedding dress designer in the capital and was already in full preparation for the ceremony. Aslan decided to divorce the Duchess of Tordel soon. In the end, everything turned out the way it did in the novel. No matter how hard Helena tried, she could not change her fate. At this time, the butler asked the Duke if he had really decided to marry Lady Feridot, since they hadn't even divorced the previous Duchess yet. The man remembered that he had documents with the girl's signature, so he ordered the torn pieces to be repaired and brought to him. Aslan no longer wished to see the one Dalton called Duchess. The butler began to object that the man's memory had not yet returned and he should not jump to conclusions. The Duke didn't understand how Dalton even dared to interfere with his decisions. He might have been like that before, but he couldn't allow it anymore. The butler apologized and began to find out in which banquet hall the Duke was going to hold the wedding ceremony. The man asked where he had married the last time, and then was greatly surprised that it was not in the convent where his mother had passed away. The butler did not understand what the Duke was saying, for his mother was still alive, though her health had become weaker. Aslan was surprised by this turn of events, and decided to find out where he first met Helena. As it turned out, he met the girl at a banquet, and then she came to him, and the same day they both decided to get married. Though small snippets, but the Duke still began to remember. At this moment, Duke ordered a temporary halt to the wedding preparations because he needed to check something. Aslan's father was a real devil. Since childhood, the Duke had only one goal: to kill his father and become free with his mum. At 18, he had the perfect plan to end his father's life and make it look like an accident. But one day, his father found out about the plan. The man attacked Aslan with a knife, but at that moment, the boy's mother protected him. The Duke's mother lost her mind due to shock and could not distinguish Aslan from his father. Every time he came to the monastery, His mother had a seizure and went mad, so he could no longer visit her. According to doctors' conclusions, there had been no improvement since that day, and she never saw Aslan again. However, the man was still sure that his mother was alive. News came periodically from the monastery. The Duke realized that those memories were just a dream, and perhaps he had really married for love. Rosalin interrupted the man's thoughts and asked why the Duke had stopped preparing for the wedding so suddenly. The man replied that he needed to check something, not only about Helena, but also about Rosalin. He recalled how he had talked about an arranged marriage with Helena, vaguely, but still the Duke remembered it. But then he did not understand why he had to lie to the girl. Rosalin became nervous again, because the Duke's memories began to return after the meeting with the heroine, and if he remembered everything, he would kick her out again. Suddenly she remembered about the man's mother. The girl began to say that Aslan had not married the Duchess for love, and they had a contract marriage, so he had not even invited his mother. Count Laristin was against this marriage and did not show up either, but the Duke's mother did not join the ceremony for another reason. Everything was true, and his mother was not there, for Aslan tried not to see her. When letters came from his mother, he wanted very much to go and meet her, but still he could not. One day Helena came to him and saw him reading letters from the monastery, in which the Duke's mother congratulated him on his engagement. The woman apologized that for reasons of her health she could not be present in person. The girl understood this, because in the novel, the man's mother because of problems with his head, until her death did not see her son. Worried about the Duke, the girl suggested that they visit Aslan's mother together. The man replied sadly that he was not on good terms with his mother and that she did not want to see him. Aslan tried to hide everything about his mother, so Helena did not dare to ask. Then the Duke realized that the girl did not use his secret against him. She did not ask about anything and just stayed close to him. Aslan told Rosalin, encouraged, that he had to meet Helena, so he postponed their wedding until he remembered everything. Now the man was no longer going to make such an important decision in such a state. The Duke rang the bell and asked Dalton to buy him a train ticket to Ellerwood, for he was to meet Helena. The butler was overjoyed at this decision. Rosalin ran up to Aslan and begged him not to do it, as his condition had deteriorated greatly since the last meeting. The girl said that she was worried about him, and he should not have been in a hurry, and should have rested and recovered well first. The Duke said that when he was near Rosalin, no feelings or emotions surfaced in him, and he was completely calm, so he was sure that he had never loved her. Aslan didn't know why she'd brought Lady Feridor to his house, but he was sure of one thing: she wouldn't help him get his memory back. He remembered that he was going to send Rosalin to Amber's house, so he gave the order immediately. The girl began to say that it was a misunderstanding, but the man did not want to listen to her. A satisfied Dalton said he would buy the nearest train ticket and have the servants prepare Rosalin's luggage as soon as possible. The Duke still couldn't figure out what was true and what was false among what he remembered. As long as there was such confusion in his mind, he couldn't decide anything. The man was sure of only one thing: all his memories were connected with Helena Laristin. He was happy when the girl was near him, so he had to meet her to find out everything. The maids took Rosalin to Amber's house and left her there. The girl began to resent that she should not be left alone, but the maids said that no order had been given to serve her, and they were busy preparing a room for Helena, who would soon return. From these events, Rosalin fell into utter despair. In the morning, Helena's parents came to check on the girl and noticed that she hadn't slept all night. They went out the door, and the father said that the girl had seen the Duke, but it seems that they had a misunderstanding. The heroine looked like she was about to cry, but Duke Tordel was not the kind of man who would make her cry. When the girl lived together with Aslan, she wrote that she was happy with him. Although the girl's mother was glad that she decided to live with them, but she could not watch her daughter suffer without forgetting Aslan. That day was the first time the Duke spoke to Helena so rudely. If even such a kind man was so angry with her, then he could have thought so all these 3 years of marriage. The girl thought she hadn't noticed anything, and thought that Aslan might love her. Helena was saddened, and promised herself that she would never be so deluded again. Arriving at the village where the girl lived, the Duke was greatly surprised by the cleanliness of the train station. The man's companion told him that Aslan had personally arranged everything here, and by his order, even in such a small village, the rails were run and the station was built. The Duke decided not to pay attention to it and decided to go straight home to Helena. The girl sat embroidering, as suddenly pricked her finger and began to remember how Aslan took care of her in such cases. The heroine tried to suggest to herself that the man was so kind to her only because of a feeling of pity. In her opinion, deep down, the Duke considered the girl unscrupulous and annoying, and she did not know it. At that moment, the girl's brother asked her to go out into the courtyard, for the Duke himself was there now. The girl immediately went down and began to ask why he had come here. The man immediately saw that Helena had hurt herself and began to worry about her, for not a drop of blood should have spilled from her beautiful fingers. Then the girl tripped and fell into the Duke's arms. Aslan began to apologize, saying that the body moved by itself. The man informed the girl's family that his wife had hurt her finger and urgently needed a first aid kit. The whole family was very happy that Aslan called Helena his wife, hurrying to bring him bandages. Already in the house, the Duke told that because of the accident, he did not remember the events of the last 5 years. He didn't know how he had met the girl and married her, or why their marriage had come to such an abrupt end. Helena began to think that Jenna had told her the truth after all, and the Duke had been so cold to her because he couldn't remember her, which meant Aslan had been good to her for the past 3 years. The man decided to ask the heroine for help. He asked the girl to explain to him in detail what kind of relationship they had and why she left him. Helena told about the contract under which they pretended to be married for 3 years. This year the contract ended and the man had a girlfriend he loved. Helena believed that Rosalin was Aslan's chosen one, and he had loved her even before he lost his memory. The Duchess almost got caught again. The girl had had enough of the strange thoughts, so she decided to never again make the same mistake that had gotten her in this state. The Duchess smiled, saying that their contract had come to an end, so Aslan didn't need to worry about her anymore. Besides, there was a man in the capital who was most likely waiting for the Duke. The man didn't bother to reply to that, paying attention to Helena's pale complexion. Aslan began to worry about the girl, inundating her with numerous questions about her well-being. Helena asked the man not to worry, but immediately coughed. The man stood up and poured a glass of water to make the girl feel a little better. The heroine blushed as memories of the past came back to her. At that moment, the Duke remembered the girl's poor health, which made her cough a lot, and as soon as it got cold outside, she fell ill. He remembered all this only when he was near Helena, and without her, his memory did not return. The man wished to stay with the Duchess in the village for a while. Aslan began to say that if he lived next to the girl, his memory would come back much faster, because they were already spouses who lived in the same house. Helena began to assure that they were not a real couple, but the man did not care, as it was not important at the moment. He had to remember everything, and for that, he needed to be near the girl. The Duke got down on one knee and asked Helena to help him, allowing him to stay by her side in the house. At this time, Rosalin tried with all her might to light the fireplace, but she could not succeed. The firewood was badly frozen, so the girl started to think about selling some of her things so that she could get warm, and she had no food at all. Rosalin tried to ask her friends for help, but none of them helped her. All the noblewomen were kind to the girl, only to hold back Helena with all their might. After Rosalin was kicked out of the duchy, her position became even lower than Helena's was. The girl cried, for she had not expected such meanness from people. Just then, Glock appeared through the window. The last time they had met, Rosalin had arrogantly fled after slapping the young man. So now Glock did not understand why the girl was in such a desperate position. Lady Feridot was angry, saying that it was useless to threaten her, since she had been exiled to this hole and had nothing to give him. Glock went to the girl's things and took out some precious jewellery from there, from which Rosalin was horrified, thinking that soon she would be left with everything without money. There was a celebratory dinner at Helena's house, in honour of the girl's recovery. The head of the family offered Aslan to taste bread with apple jam, which he personally cooked. The man asked the Duke not to be shy and feel at home, and not to deny himself anything. The Duke assured that he would not sit idle, and if they needed help, they could turn to him. The girl's parents said that they shouldn't have bothered, and Aslan had only recently arrived, so Helena just had to show the man their house. Aslan leaned into the girl's ear and whispered that he would like to walk through the house because he was interested in seeing the place where his wife lived. Helena stammered as she was called consort, but the Duchess's family insisted that the address was unimportant, for Aslan was part of their family as well. The head of the family sent the couple off for a stroll, while he and his wife went about preparing Aidan's room. Helena led the Duke to her room, which used to be her father's study, but he had cleaned it up so that the girl could live there in peace. From the window of her room, she could just see a field of lilac flowers. Her father had once said that he looked at those flowers every time he thought of his daughter. Aslan remarked that the girl had a wonderful relationship with her family. Helena confirmed the man's words, saying that it was all due to her separation from her family at an early age, where they lived apart for almost 10 years. The Duke didn't understand what that meant, so the girl assumed that Aslan didn't remember anything. Helena told how she had been kidnapped by Count Loristin when she was 10 years old. When she escaped, she had nowhere to go, and Aslan wished to marry the girl, and afterward helped her start communicating with her real family. The man wondered if that was the reason Helena called their marriage arranged. Though the heroine told him that they had been married for 3 years until she was of age, Aslan didn't understand his benefit from the pact. Helena reminded him how she had offered to give the Duke the entire Laristine inheritance, but he had refused. To the Duke, the Countess Laristan's property that the girl had inherited was an insignificant amount of money to him, so he wanted to know what else Helena had offered him. The Duchess told him that Aslan had been too kind to her and had taken pity on her. When he heard the girl's story, he could not refuse her, for he was a merciful and sympathetic man. The Duke felt uncomfortable, because he had never thought that they would say something like that about him. He was a businessman who did everything for profit. The man even did charity work just to maintain his image. Aslan was sure that he had never done anything out of sympathy. Helena began to refute her husband's words, for he was kind to her, even though they were only fake spouses, but the Duke had always taken care of her, so she had been happy all these 3 years. After a little thinking, Aslan came to the conclusion that he loved the girl, and very much. Helena was surprised by this conclusion, but the Duke could find no other explanation for what was happening to him. Since birth, the man had never been kind to anyone if it was disadvantageous. Helena couldn't believe it all. Aslan went on to say that the girl was someone who could give him neither money nor fame, but he still tried to make her happy, which meant that Helena's very existence was very valuable to him. The girl didn't want to be wrong again, thinking that Aslan was confused in his thoughts because of his memory loss. Helena began to say that everything was not as the Duke said, where their life together annoyed him all these 3 years. They hadn't married for love. There was no mention of love in their contract. They just agreed not to bother each other. The Duke immediately realised that the girl was referring to his conversation with Rosalin Feridot. Helena began to recall how Aslan had dined with Rosalin when she was ill, and he had even missed her birthday. In the girl's opinion, the Duke didn't remember that he actually loved Lady Feridot. Aslan really didn't know why he had said it then, since not all of his memories had come back, but he remembered the moment he had said it to Rosalin, and those words meant nothing to him. For the 3 years that their contract lasted, they had promised to love each other. The man was annoyed, because during all this time the Duchess had never once said that she loved him. Aslan made the girl happy in marriage, but he never asked her to spend her whole life with him. Helena did not understand what the man was talking about. Then the man started to ask if he had said that he loved her. The girl did not recall such a thing. Then the Duke suggested that he did not do it with words, but with his body. The Duchess became embarrassed and began to say that they had never shared a bed. At least they had slept together a few times, but only because they thought the servants suspected something. However, apart from that, they had never shared a bed or even held hands. At that moment, Aslan realised that he was holding on well, because in all likelihood, he was waiting for the girl to propose herself. He had never confessed his love to girls, as he was always shy. These words caused a shock in Helena's mind, and she began not to understand why the Duke was telling her such nonsense. The girl began to assure herself that she should not expect anything, as she did not want to step on the same rake. The Duchess began to assure her husband that he could not judge sensibly, as he did not remember everything. She wasn't going to get her hopes up and expect anything, because she wasn't the one who didn't want it to happen again. Helena had said that when the memory came back, the man would realize that he had taken it all wrong. Aslan understood that. That's why he wanted to stay near the girl, to remember everything as soon as possible. Aslan had been at Violet's house for 2 days already and fit perfectly into their family. When the man needed to fetch firewood, the girl's mother asked Helena to go along with him. The girl couldn't understand how she could help, but the Duke insisted that he would be very bored without her. In the yard, Aslan was skillfully wielding an axe. Helena noticed that the man was good at household chores, even though he had never done them before. The Duke didn't see anything strange in it, because chopping wood was like practicing with a sword. The girl added with embarrassment that the man was very good at cooking too. Aslan only repeated after the others, and he was not assigned anything difficult. At that moment, the Duke was brought comfortable shoes and clothes. The man was very pleased, for the clothes he had borrowed from Helena's father were too small for him, so he was uncomfortable. Since the Duke was on vacation, Dalton took over all his duties temporarily. The servant said to call him if they needed anything, then hurried away. Helena wondered if Rosalie wasn't waiting for the man at home. If she knew that Aslan was staying so long at his ex-wife's house, she would be angry. The Duke said they were still officially husband and wife. The girl began to not understand, because she had left the signed divorce papers when she left the estate. Aslan took off his t-shirt and said that he tore up the papers since he had never thought of divorcing Helena. Besides, Rosalin Feridor was not his beloved. The man could not yet remember why he had brought her into the house, but he was sure he loved Helena, and even now he wore his wedding ring. In all 3 years, Aslan had never once taken off his wedding ring. However, there had been some rumours. Someone said that inside the Duke's ring, another girl's name was written down, and it was connected to the name of a flower. Helena asked if the Duke had checked whose name was on the inside of the ring. By looking at it, the man would be able to figure out exactly who he really loved. The man took the ring off and looked at the name, then suggested the girl do the same, but she was unwilling to look, thinking the name Rosalin was there. On the inside of the ring was written the girl's real name, Ryla Violet. If one glimpsed it, one could confuse it with the name of a flower. These were exactly the rumours the girl had heard. The more Aslan listened to Helen, the more he realised that he loved only her. According to the Duke's memories, the girl left her ring and walked away. There was no name on the inside of the ring, as they had an arranged marriage. The man realised that this marriage had hit Helena's pride, but it seemed to him that all these 3 years he had loved her unrequitedly. The girl was again greatly surprised. Because of pride, Aslan could not confess and lost 3 years, so the heroine was upset and left him. The Duke promised that he would not be such a fool again. Aslan was going to change the girl's feelings until she loved him as he loved her. Helena had never heard the Duke say something like that before. It was as if the man had become a completely different person. The girl began to think that with the loss of memory, Aslan's character had changed. At this time, Rosalin asked Glock to stop, for she had already sold all the jewellery, dresses, and even the shoes she wore. The girl had sold everything, and therefore did not understand what the young man now needed from her. Glock was not satisfied with all this, considering it a mere trifle. Rosalin was desperate, for it was all she could give to the young man, but she had nothing else. After all, Aslan had abandoned her, and she had to survive. There was nothing she could give Glock to stop threatening her. As it turned out, the young man had come far from getting those pennies. Glock had an idea, and if they united, they could achieve a lot. Then these empty jewels would become nothing. Rosalin did not understand the meaning of his words. The young man kissed the girl's hand and said that for the sake of common goals, he would make Rosalin the Duke's wife. In the afternoon, Violet's whole family worked in the garden. Violet's brother said that they had added cinnamon to the apple pie, and then asked if the Duke liked that approach. Aslan thanked for the treat, saying that he liked to try new things. Helena was worried that she had never responded to the Duke's recent words. The satisfied man offered her a delicious pie. At that moment, the girl was convinced that Aslan had definitely lost his memory since he offered her a cinnamon pie. She didn't like strong odours, so she didn't eat anything that contained cinnamon. Knowing this, the Duke always put the cinnamon food away when she was around. Helena thanked him and wanted to taste it, but the man pushed the plate away, asking why she was doing that, because she didn't like that kind of food. She had enjoyed the apple pie a few days ago, which meant she didn't like cinnamon. She didn't like strong odours, so Aslan assumed the girl had a sensitive nose. Helena was beginning to hope that the man's memories had returned, but he objected that he had just guessed, since she had been so cautious about looking at that piece of pie. From the man's question, he realised that he had known about all of this before. The Duchess was always surprised by such things. The man had a very good memory and was always very thoughtful. In the girl's opinion, the Duke memorised everything as soon as he heard the information and did not forget it afterwards. Aslan agreed, saying that it was like that when information was important, but he never remembered things he wasn't interested in, so Helena was probably a very significant person to him, since even he knew about her taste preferences. The man could not even remember the names of people who were not related to his business, and he often confused faces too. The Duke began to ask if the girl kept a large amount of money secret from him. Helena assured that such a thing simply could not be. Hearing this answer, the man was convinced that he was very fond of the girl. He was very sorry that this love was unrequited. The Duke wondered if the girl really felt nothing for him during all these 3 years of marriage. Helena was embarrassed and could not give a normal answer, which made Aslan think that he was very unattractive. If a man knew that, he would have gained experience from childhood and learned how to seduce ladies. The Duke apologised for rushing off, saying that he would study hard from now on, so Helena was just obliged to give him a second chance. The girl was still sure that Aslan was just confused, since he had lost his memory. The Duchess let go of the man's hand, saying that they would talk when he had all his memories back, for he might have changed his mind. The next morning, the sleepy girl was met by her mother, who asked her to wait a little while for breakfast. The Duchess's brother only wished to eat meat, so he asked the girl to help with that. Aslan appeared at the door of the house, complaining of the cold air that was constant in these parts morning and evening. The man had chopped more wood on purpose, fearing Helena would freeze. He remembered clearly that she was often ill and that he had taken care of her. The girl was greatly embarrassed, but still thought that she should not pay attention to the words of the Duke, otherwise she would suffer again as soon as his memory returned. Suddenly, a letter carrier knocked at the door. Helena rose from her chair and headed for the exit. The Duke stopped the girl and threw a blanket over her. Helena assured him that it was summer and she wouldn't freeze, but the man insisted that she had been ill recently, so she should be careful. Helena wondered how the man knew that she had been sick recently. Aslan began to claim that he had heard about it somewhere, but he didn't know where. The couple came out to Hans, and he handed the girl the newspaper. The young man began to say that he was very happy to meet Helena again. The Duke was furious, because the letter carrier should have just handed the newspaper, not brazenly approached the client in front of him. With a horrified face, the Duke said that he did not dispute that Helena was beautiful, but he really did not like that Hans had dared to approach his wife. The young man began to apologise profusely, as he did not know that the girl was his wife, and then left the court in tears. A murderous aura emanated from Aslan. Helena began to reprimand her husband, for it was wrong to do that to a young man. The Duke didn't think it was normal for Hans to flirt with a customer in the workplace, because it was negligent. The man had to intimidate the young man, because he was spinning like a gnat near his beautiful wife, and the Duke simply could not look at all this. He understood that looking at Helena's beauty, it was hard not to lose his mind, so Aslan did not do anything serious. The Duchess was shocked that her husband could say that without blinking an eye. It was most likely due to memory loss, as Aslan had never been like that before. When they lived together, he had never scared off men approaching a girl. It was the opposite in their family, as Helena was the one who was always jealous. The girl said that the Duke had really changed a lot, and now he was not the Aslan she knew. The man wondered what had changed in him, but Helena found it difficult to explain. The Duke offered to sit down on the bench and tell her what he was like in the past. Aslan had previously been told that he had to be helped by a story about the past to get his memory back, but the story had to be from someone who was his closest relative. Helena said that the man used to be very caring and kind. She always liked that the Duke was polite to other people. In bad harvest seasons, he shared grain, and every year he supported the poor and needy. Regardless of the circumstances, Aslan always did this, but never took it out in public. According to the man, the girl called kindness the fact that the businessman was engaged in charity, and he regulated taxes only so that the imperial family would not reproach him. Aslan used to be unable to pass by when he saw a person or an animal in need of help, because he was compassionate. It all seemed strange to the man, since he didn't like animals and never felt sorry for anyone. The Duke realized that most likely he just wanted to look better in Helena's eyes. It was clear from the girl's eyes that she thought he was the nicest and kindest man in the world. Perhaps the man was afraid of undermining the heroine's trust. Since the man pretended to be such a man for Helena's sake, it was possible that she had fallen in love with him. If that was the case, the past 3 years had not been easy for the girl. Aslan said that he was just pretending so that the girl would think well of him. His views couldn't have changed in a few years, and he had just put a lot of effort into winning Helena's heart. The girl tried to object, saying that it was reckless to talk against herself, for the man remembered nothing of his deeds. However, Aslan knew his real self better than anyone. He was the kind of man who deceived others to get what he wanted, and for 3 years he had been deceiving Helena because he was afraid she would leave. But no matter how hard he tried, the girl still left him, so now the Duke was determined to be sincere. The heroine had always thought Aslan was a cool, confident man, but now she didn't realize who was standing in front of her. Without thinking long, Helena said that even if the man was deceiving her, she would still consider him a good person. Someone who did good things to make himself appear better in front of the person he loved could be considered good. Everything Aslan did was with care and respect for others. The man was glad that Helena finally recognized that he loved her. The girl jumped up and started to prove that she only did it because the Duke was calling himself a bad man. All those 3 years, and even now, the Duke remained a good man to Helena. If the girl believed it, then probably the man was happy loving her. Rosalin did not understand how Glock was going to make her a duchess, because Aslan did not love her. The young man said he knew Duke Tordel's top secret, and if used, Rosalin could become a duchess. Glock revealed that Helena Larestein was actually a commoner named Ryla Violet. At the age of 10, she was brought into the Larestein household and lived as Helena. The young man confirmed that the Duke was well aware of the girl's past, and that was why this secret should play into their hands. Although Aslan might not have been hurt, but Ryla Violet would definitely not be able to stay all right. The Duke cared a lot for his wife, so he wouldn't let her suffer. Using his weakness, Rosalin could become the new duchess. Glock asked the girl to trust him, because soon everything the nobles had was going to be his. Aslan was spending time reading a book when he suddenly noticed that his wife was going somewhere. Helena had one thing to do, and she decided to go into town for a while, saying she would be back before dinner. The Duke wanted to go with her, but the girl was afraid that they would be discussed if they were seen on the city streets. There was nothing of interest in Helena's affairs, for she was just on her way to teach the children Polish. The man didn't realize that his wife spoke Polish. The heroine had learned it before, but she did not know it that well. Aslan praised the modesty of the girl. After all, she taught children, but still spoke about the low level of knowledge of the language. The Duke also knew Polish, so he would like to help his wife. Helena had known for a long time that Aslan was good at Polish as a medium, and he must have been bored since he hadn't gone anywhere for so long. The girl accepted the help, but asked the man to be careful not to reveal his identity. For some reason, the girl was very uneasy. Whatever shabby clothes Aslan wore, it was noticeable that he was a nobleman. On the way to the church, the couple met a grandmother who wanted to talk about her granddaughter. As soon as the topic of conversation turned to Aslan, Helena immediately turned around and asked her husband to get out of there. It was very hot this afternoon, though it was spring outside. The Duke suggested that they sit down and rest, and then continue on their way. The man took off his hat and covered Helena from the sun. The girl did not understand what he was doing, but he said that he must be useful. The heroine saw the man as a completely different person who was acting like a child. Helena looked at her husband and was embarrassed, for she did like this kind of behavior a little after all. Seeing the girl, all the children of the church were happy. Suddenly Aslan approached and they became a little wary of him. Helena said that it was her old friend and he just wanted to attend the lesson. Earlier the girl said that children memorize everything well, since they listen, but the Duke did not understand why the girl so underestimates herself. Apparently, even when she was a duchess, she still underestimated herself. It felt like something Helena was used to. Looking at her, memories began to come back to Aslan. Before the wedding, he sometimes had dreams in which a girl he had seen for the first time appeared. However, after he met her in real life, he soon realized that these were his memories from another life. The memories were different enough from reality to be called a dream, and assuming that past lives existed, it was easy to explain the mess that was happening now. Aslan's mind was still a mess, but he knew one thing for sure. The one whom the Duke loved in his past and present life was not Rosalin Feridot, but Rila Violet. Unexpectedly, the girl distracted Aslan by asking him what his relationship with Helena was. The man asked to keep his words a secret, saying that they were married. Actions are transferred to the office of Mr. Metchet, where he cursed Aslan Tordel, believing that he had to deal with the Duke once and for all. The man realized that he should not have entrusted the case to people from the mercenaries, because they could not normally do anything. Metchet realized that Aslan might begin to suspect them, his rivals, but the Duke had done nothing until now. Suddenly, Glock burst into the man's room, saying that he could help him in any way he could. The man started to scream, but then the young man asked if he had ordered the murder of Aslan Tordel. Metchet tried to pretend that he knew nothing, but Glock began to say that the man should make sure that his men did not run their mouths. The man began to curse his servants, for he had previously thought that luck was on his side, since most of the officials and relatives of the family supported him. Many people had told Metchet that the Western branch would definitely be in his hands if he killed Aslan, so he had to think of a way to get rid of the Duke once and for all. The man began to nervously question what Glock wanted. The young man repeated again that he would help him, because the man knew how to kill Aslan. If everything worked out, the Western branch would go to Metchet. The young man held out his hand, and they made a verbal agreement. At this time, Rosalin did not know what to do, because if she agreed to help Glock, he would make her a duchess. The girl did not dare to go for it, because the young man was going to kill the Duke, and if they found out about everything, Rosalin was immediately executed. She wasn't going to get screwed over by Glock, so the girl decided to wash her hands of it. Helena finished the lesson and wished everyone a good weekend, saying that they would meet again next week. The excited kids jumped up from their seats and started asking the girl to go for a walk with them. The Duchess did not understand what to do, for she was not even an official teacher, so she could hardly accompany the students. The pastor came into the room and allowed the Duchess to go for a walk with them, since the children were usually alone in the woods or by the sea. Helena took the children by the hands, and they travelled with the Duke to the coast near the city. The students wanted to swim in the water, but Helena asked them to do it another time, since they hadn't even brought a change of clothes. The girls approached Helena and they began to build sandcastles. After spending time playing in the sand, the girl did not notice that it was noon. Suddenly she turned around and saw Aslan playing with the children. Helena began to think that the Duke was good at everything, even with children, so it seemed to her that the man would make a wonderful father. However, the girl believed that she would not be able to see it in person. For 3 years of marriage, they had never slept together. Officially, they shared one room and one bed, but Aslan never touched the heroine. Moreover, Aslan would sometimes go off and sleep on the couch. Helena felt sad at the thought that the Duke used to hate her a lot. During the walk, the Duchess was very tired and sat down to rest. At that moment, Aslan approached her and asked for a bottle of water. Helena handed him the drink, and strange memories began to surface in her mind. The girl didn't know what it was, for she had certainly never slept next to the Duke. Without thinking long, Aslan took the heroine's hand. Only she felt it, as her heart began to beat so hard that the girl could not breathe. Helena blushed, while the man just froze and looked at his wife's beautiful face. Aslan was about to kiss the girl, but the student who suddenly appeared stopped him. The heroine stood up and walked towards the boy, not believing that now she felt desire at such a moment. The girl began to drive those thoughts away with all her might. She didn't know why Aslan was acting like this, but she was sure that the man would regret it after he got his memories back. Helena didn't want all of this, so she decided to help the Duke not to stumble. She needed to stay away from the Duke. The next day, the weather was beautiful in the village. On this day, after what happened, the Duchess began to be plagued by some devilish whispers. The whispers said that since the girl loved Aslan, she should have recognized the fact that the man was also attracted to her. Helena's mind was so full of thoughts that she couldn't even sleep at night. Now she had run away from home under the pretext that she wanted to borrow a book from the priest. The girl realized that the current Aslan was showing romantic interest in her, but she couldn't reciprocate, believing that the man needed to meet someone else. Suddenly, Helena noticed an unusually large number of people on the streets of the city. Suddenly, the girl was called by Lady Emily, who wanted to ask her something. Lady Emily said she was still single and looking for a husband. The Duchess began to guess little by little what reason the girl had for approaching her. Emily began to ask what Helena's relationship was with that handsome man with the blonde hair. Helena didn't answer and asked why the atmosphere in the village had changed so much. The girl said that there was a festival that would be held in Eris for 3 days, and the first day was tomorrow. Their village was very close to the town, so all the people were very excited. For information, Emily wanted to find out about Aslan, but Helena began to say that she had a lot of things to do and had somewhere urgent to hurry. The Duchess ran away, leaving the girl lost. At Violet's house, the girl's mother suggested that they take a break the next day and go to the festival. The head of the family agreed because they had no urgent business, so it was worth spending time together before the work increased. The girl's brother was very happy, and Helena was looking forward to the festival. The young man was surprised that the girl had never been to such events, because he thought that since she lived in the capital, in the very centre of the country, she was already tired of festivals. Once Helena had been to a similar event organised by the imperial family. However, this place was more like a social party for the aristocracy than a festival. It was also a first experience for Aslan, so they had to try out all the entertainment. The Duke was surprised to be called to the event. The girl's mother began to ask why he did not want to go with them. According to the man, the woman wanted to go as a family, so he thought that he should not have accompanied them. Helena's father assured that they should all go together, because they lived under one roof and could be considered a complete family. Aslan had never experienced anything like this before, so he couldn't believe that he was really allowed to go with them. The girl started to say that the more people, the merrier. At this moment, the Duke thought that the word family was the only word that gave off so much warmth. A little while later, the Duke went outside to ask his servant what was going on in the capital. The man told of the relative order of the situation, for no problems had arisen, but Aslan had received a letter, and it was from Rosalin Ferido. Aslan read the letter carefully, and then became furious. It was now clear to him that Rosalin had lied to him. Apparently the girl did not know that her lies had been exposed, so she had sent him the letter so shamelessly. The Duke began to say that he had to go to the centre as soon as possible. The servant began to assure him that there was no need for the Duke's personal visit, because he could have simply ordered it, and the man would have sorted everything out quickly. Aslan was very angry, so he decided to deal with it himself. He did not want to let Rosalin go unpunished, since she dared to take Helena's place. On the day of the festival, the girl's mother applied makeup to Helena. Looking in the mirror, the girl was greatly surprised, for she had never seen anything more beautiful in her life. Her father noticed the dazzling beauty, and now he was unable to open his eyes. Her brother began to praise the girl, eventually asking Aslan if he thought the same. The Duke agreed with his wife's dazzling beauty, saying that she was simply incredible. At the festival, the woman liked a lovely pendant that looked good on the girl, so they should have bought it. Helena started to refuse, as she did not want to bother her family with unnecessary expenses. The girl once again looked at the bracelet of indescribable beauty and then ran to have fun. Watching the performance of circus clowns, the girl could not find Aslan. Then she noticed that the man was near the store where the beautiful bracelet was. The girl approached the Duke and began to find out what he was doing there. As it turned out, the man saw everything, so he bought a bracelet for his wife. Helena did not understand why Aslan needed all this, because he bought even something that she barely looked at. The man didn't even think about it and just bought everything. The Duke began to think whether he had done the right thing, or whether his wife would feel obliged because of it. The conversation was interrupted by the girl's father, who wanted to go home because they still had to go to work tomorrow. Helena wanted to ask why Aslan had bought all these things, but now was not the right moment. Then the man began to tell the couple to walk around some more, as the most interesting part of the festival was starting in the evening. Helena's parents grabbed their son and together quickly removed from the festival, leaving the perplexed couple. The Duke calmly accepted this behaviour and suggested that the girl enjoy the festival while there was still free time. In the evening, all the townspeople were dancing around the fire under the starry sky. Aslan began to suggest that Helena join the townspeople, saying that everyone here could dance freely, so they should too. The man took his wife's hand and asked her to move as her heart commanded, for they were not at a ball. And so the couple began to dance, during which they were both very happy. At this time, Rosalin was very anxious, for Aslan had not yet answered her letter. Then Glock entered the room, saying that all the preparations had been completed and there was only one hitch. The main problem was whether Aslan Tordel's memories were restored or not. Rosalin began to assure him that if the Duke had remembered everything, he would have returned to the centre with Helena long ago. But since they still hadn't arrived, it meant that not all of his memory had returned to him. Glock realised that there would be problems if things continued like this. Only if Duke Tordel remembered everything and treasured his wife again would they be able to put their plan into action. So the young man decided to speed up the process. After the festival, Helena sat on the coast as her legs were very sore. A man passed by the girl and dropped his handkerchief. The heroine noticed it and decided to immediately return it, from which the man was very happy. The nobleman wanted to know what kind of family the girl was from in order to thank her later. Helena began to say that she lived not far away in Ellerwood, and her family was not influential enough to call her a noblewoman. The man assumed that the girl had come for a vacation from another city, but it was not quite so. Here Aslan interrupted the conversation, wanting to know what was going on. The man justified that he just wanted to thank the lady for picking up his handkerchief. With a terrifying aura, the Duke asked the nobleman to leave them, for he had already accomplished everything he could do. The man became worried and hurriedly left the couple. Helena thanked Aslan for his help, saying that the nobleman had done nothing wrong. The Duke didn't understand why the girl had a hobby of collecting handkerchiefs. He wondered, this time and last time, why she did it all the time. In Helena's opinion, Aslan's behaviour was unreasonable. At that moment, the girl realised that memories from their first meeting were starting to come back to him. The Duchess asked the man if he started to remember their first meeting, but the man began to think that the girl just wanted him to bring back the memories and hurry to the centre. The man said that the words just happened to come out of his mouth, and how they met, he was not interested. Helena found it strange, for the Duke remembered that she had picked up the handkerchief he had dropped. The girl thought the man was uncomfortable, as he remembered his love for Rosalin, and maybe Aslan was really lying. If the Duke remembered, he could return to Lady Feridor. In the girl's opinion, the Duke was a kind man, so he probably just didn't want to offend his wife. Helena knew that if the memories didn't come back to the man after all, they could still be together for a while. Aslan thought that the girl doubted him, so he should have been extremely careful about getting caught in the future. Helena, in her thoughts, apologised to the Duke for the fact that she would be pretending for a while longer, as if she knew nothing. The girl's family must have been worried, so the Duchess decided to return home. Suddenly, Helena stumbles, but a man manages to pick her up. The Duchess wanted to keep walking, but Aslan wanted to make sure his wife hadn't hurt her leg. There were many abrasions on her leg, so the Duke wanted to call a doctor. The girl began to assure him that she just needed to get home, and there she would treat her leg in peace. The Duke didn't want to hear anything, thinking that he shouldn't have taken his health so lightly, as blisters could appear. Passers-by did not understand why the man was kneeling before Helena, thinking he was proposing to her or was her servant. The heroine couldn't believe that they looked so awkward in the eyes of other people. The girl rather wished to leave, so she promised Aslan to take care of everything herself later, but now they should go back home. Helena wanted to take the shoe, but the Duke took the girl in his arms. The shoes were chafing, so it wasn't worth it for the Duchess to walk in them. The man assured her that he would get his wife home safely, while she could just relax. Helena was very uncomfortable, and she certainly couldn't just relax in this situation. The nobleman had been watching the couple all this time, assessing whether they were lovers. Suddenly, there was a strange sound behind the man. Although he had decided not to bring his sword because of the festival, but he was still good at fighting. Just then, an unknown hand of a young man pulled the nobleman into a dark alley. When Helena returned home in the carriage, she noticed that they were travelling on the wrong road to her house. Aslan asked the girl not to worry, for he just wanted to show her to the doctor. Though the Duchess wished to simply return home, the man insisted on first aid. They reached the manor, and the Duke took his wife in his arms. Helena assured him that she was able to walk on her own, but the man asked her not to kick, or they would both fall. Aslan rang the doorbell, and Gus Chester showed up on the doorstep. Oscar Langston had once told the Duke that an interesting lieutenant lived in this house. When the man needed help, he could safely come to the place. Gus let the pair pass, after which Aslan asked for a doctor to be called, as his wife had hurt her leg. Helena thought that a man who couldn't even remember his lieutenant's name couldn't give orders so naturally. As the girl thought, the Duke had probably already regained his memory, and he was just hiding it. The doctor treated the leg, saying that until the wound healed, she should avoid contact with water as much as possible, and that she should rub a special ointment on it every morning. The Duchess began to apologize for bothering the man for such trifles. Aslan did not want to listen to apologies, because the girl was in pain, and he had to do something. The Duke did not understand why his wife did not take care of her health at all, for she was definitely in a lot of pain. It was indeed a small thing for the girl, but the Duke did not accept it, asking her to take care of herself and react even to small things. Gus interrupted the couple's sweet conversation, asking about the condition of Helena's leg. Besides, it was already late, so the lieutenant offered Aslan to stay at his place for the night. The heroine was afraid that her family would be very worried. The Duke did not want such an outcome, so he ordered to prepare a carriage, because they had to return home today. Getting closer to the lieutenant, Aslan decided to find out the news from the centre. Hans said he had received messages and gave the last one to Oscar. The Duke had ordered that if there was anything urgent, he should go to Ellerwood at once. Aslan always left the window at the end of the room on the second floor open. There was no need to waste time thinking about whether the message was worth the Duke's immediate consideration, for it was already his business. The couple headed for the carriage. Gus began to think that the Duke remembered everything, since he behaved exactly the same as before. The girl quietly made her way to the house where her parents had been waiting outside for a long time. Helena still did not return, so the girl's mother already wanted to send her son to the pastor. Of course, a lot of things happened, but nothing serious. The girl was having so much fun that she lost track of time. Aslan intervened, saying that something had happened after all, and Helena had hurt her leg. They had gone to the doctor together, so they had been delayed on the road. The action returns to the unknown nobleman who was communicating with Glock. The young man realized that the man was interested in the Duchess, so he offered his help. The nobleman thought he had fallen in love with Helena at first sight, but the man the lady was with seemed to appreciate her. The man didn't think that he had anything to oppose the Duke, so to him, Glock's help was useless to him. The young man began to say that these words were different from what he knew, because in fact, those people did not love each other. According to Glock, the man the nobleman saw with Helena had been in an accident and lost his memory, and when he remembered everything, he would immediately return to his beloved. The young man felt sorry for the girl, because she did not even suspect that her ex-husband, who never loved her, appeared to her only to bring back her memories. The nobleman wondered if it was true that the Duke had deliberately come to the girl and was her ex-husband. Glock confirmed the boy's guesses, because now it could be said that Helena was divorced from Aslan. These two were not known to have warm feelings for each other. The young man tried his best to prove to the nobleman that the Duke was just using the girl. The man wasn't sure that Aslan didn't remember anything, as he might have already remembered everything. For Glock, it was easy to check, so he whispered his plan in the nobleman's ear and left him, wishing him good luck with Helena. The man didn't understand why Glock was helping him. After all, it was the first time they had met. The young man asked not to feel obliged. He really just wanted to help, but in return, the man could write him how everything went. Upon reaching home, Glock informed Rosalin that everything was going according to plan, and at this rate she would soon become a duchess. The girl realized that Glock was really going to make her a duchess and then kill Aslan. She couldn't understand why the Duke still hadn't answered her letter. If things continued like this, it would be very difficult for Rosalin to justify herself, and she couldn't let that happen. Glock was completely relaxed and suggested that the girl look for a wedding dress or pick out rings beforehand. Rosalin said that it was too early because they were not finished yet. The girl wanted to think of a way to help Aslan without Glock finding out about it. After some thought, Rosalin said that perhaps she should go to Ellerwood and check it out. She thought that if Aslan didn't answer, it would be better if she told him about Glock's plan in person. The young man decided to make sure Rosalin wasn't up to anything. Glock said that the girl had forgotten something, for he could at any moment reveal her secret. The young man advised Rosalin to stop filling her pretty head with all sorts of nonsense and do what they say. The girl was shocked by this turn of events and did not know what to do. 3 days later, Helena's leg was completely healed, and because of it, the girl hadn't left the house all that time. The girl didn't mind, because she was embarrassed to see Aslan, but today she definitely had to go out for a walk. Helena used to be able to lie in bed for weeks, but now it wasn't so easy. The locals asked a huge number of questions about Aslan that the girl didn't even know if she should go out. After breakfast, the heroine went to the hill for a little walk. It was the first time Aslan had come to Ellerwood for such a long period of time. It had been a long time since the Duke had been here, and it seemed to her that they had grown closer here than they had once been on the estate. Helena thought the man was a serious man, but inside he was just like a child, just as restless. The girl still loved Aslan, and she had come to the village because she hoped that her feelings would disappear. Aslan appeared behind the Duchess, making the girl blush. No matter how sad she was, she still had to let the man go. Helena began to tell me that there was a similar hill near her last house, and she was glad she could find a similar place. When she lived at Tordell Manor, her favourite place was the garden. Aslan had planted many different flowers in it, especially for the girl. The Duke concluded that they appeared to be on good terms. Helena couldn't say for sure. Aslan behaved in a friendly way, but she couldn't understand his true feelings. At one time, the Duchess seemed to like the man, but later he would become cold and aloof. Such ambiguous behaviour made Helena confused. The girl began to ask if the Duke had any questions about how he was before, because she could tell everything. The man immediately realised that his wife wanted him to remember everything as soon as possible. Helena realised that if Aslan really did remember everything already, she couldn't turn a blind eye to it forever. The girl wanted the man to stay, but he needed to leave. Since the Duke's wife was determined to kick him out, he decided to obey. Aslan thought he knew exactly what he could do to help him. The man leaned over and kissed Helena. After a while, the girl found it hard to breathe, and she pushed the Duke away. She needed to say something, but her mind was a mess. Aslan had once heard that memory could be restored by replaying past events. Since they were a married couple, something like this was probably not uncommon. Helena still thought that the Duke's memories had come back, and she knew for a fact that they hadn't kissed. Thinking briefly, the girl began to say that Aslan had already remembered everything, and that their marriage was actually arranged. The man did not deny that he had brought back all the memories, however. They were not yet complete. As an example, he pointed out that it seemed to him that kissing was completely normal for the couple, and it was strange that they had not done it before. The Duke came to the top of the hill to share this with Helena, but it seems it was the wrong decision. Aslan pulled out the ring, saying that it had been given to him by an assistant who said it had been sent by the maid. The girl immediately realized that it was her wedding ring, so she began to not understand why it was here. Aslan held out the ring and said that he wished their marriage to be real, for he loved the girl. Helena did not believe that these words could be true, for she could not like such a man as Aslan, for it was simply impossible, and she was no match for him. The girl still thought Aslan was more suited to the true protagonist. Even if the man's feelings were true, she was afraid that he would change his mind after the memories came back, so she decided to talk about it when he remembered everything. The Duke had agreed to this condition, wanting to get his memory back as soon as possible. Helena had been waiting for Aslan to really like her, but every time she saw him and Rosalin together, her hopes were dashed. The Duke had never shown his feelings before he lost his memory. The girl began to say that when the memories returned, Aslan's feelings might change. The man wanted to refute these words, but Helena believed that it could not be true, because he did not love her before, and even if he did, he still did not show it. Aslan didn't believe her words, saying that even if he lost his memory again, he would then return to Helena and love again. Back at the manor, Glock questioned the man if he had verified the information he was talking about. Matchett's men recognized anyone who might have known the real Helena Larrestein. The man's aide inquired from the lady that was close as a child with Helena. The lady revealed that the current Helena Larrestein was drastically different from her young self. According to her, Lady Larrestein was a completely different person as a child, from facial features to hair color and personality. Matchett was not convinced by this information after all. Everyone changed as they grew older. The servant went on to say that they had inquired about the situation with the staff working at the mansion. Upon barely hearing Helena's name, they refused to talk to them, so almost nothing could be learned. However, one lady agreed to share valuable information. The woman said that the current Duchess of Tordell was not the lady they were supposed to serve. If one recalled the rumours at the time, one could assume that Count Larrestein had kidnapped the girls. It was rumoured that all the girls were the same age as his daughter Helena, plus they all looked like her. That lady added something else on the subject. At first, she was only happy to serve her mistress, but the problem was that different ladies were constantly appearing in her place. Matchett could not think that the Duchess was only pretending to be an aristocrat. The man had finally discovered Aslan Torridal's weakness and was very happy about it. The aristocrat wished to bring in that noble lady and the maid as witnesses. Glock supported this idea because if he added his words, the spouses would simply have no way out. The man wondered how Glock had learned all this, as he knew almost nothing about the young man. Glock considered it unimportant because he had provided all the information, and it was absolutely free of charge, so the aristocrat did not have to worry that he would betray him. The young man said that Matchett just had to do what he said. All they had to do was wait for Aslan Tordell's memory to fully return. Once they were sure that he remembered everything, they would proceed to the next stage. But for now, they should rest. After that conversation, the Duke began to ask about his past often. It was supposed to help him regain lost memories. At this point, Aslan was asking questions about his past preferences, but Helena was unsure, saying that he used to do crossword puzzles in his spare time. The Duchess did it too, but not often, as she wasn't really interested in such things before. However, after she joined the Duke one day, she started solving them on her own. Helena felt a sense of satisfaction if she was able to solve all the difficult problems. Once the girl sent her questionnaire to the newspaper, and even won a prize. During their conversations, the couple often talked about the Duchess than about Aslan. But nevertheless, the girl thought that sometimes it was useful to look back at herself from the past. The Duke said that the girl's hobbies were wonderful. He noticed that Helena spoke Polish well. The girl said that the man had known about it before, and there were times when they had chatted with someone in Polish. If you think about it, that's how Asen got to know that she spoke the language. Besides, the Duchess translated books from Polish to earn money. Aslan interrupted Helena, asking why she was forced to work. He began to blame himself for not giving his wife enough money in the past. The girl became embarrassed, and said that, in truth, she just wanted to buy a present with her money. The Duke's face changed in an instant, for she would not have guessed it. It was surprising that Helena knew the language very well, since the publishing house offered her cooperation. The heroine began to assure that she was just lucky, and moreover, they entrusted this work to her, because they could pay less than professional translators. Aslan asked not to be modest, though Helena said it was just luck. But if she didn't take the initiative and show her skills, she wouldn't have a chance. Then poor quality translations could be a huge loss for the publisher. Come to think of it, the fact that the publisher continued to communicate with the girl only meant that her translation was definitely excellent. Now Helena thought that the problems of the past were not so unsolvable. She had never heard such words in her address before, and she was very glad. The conversation between the spouses gave the girl a pleasant feeling of peace. At this time, Aslan was angry with himself, saying that he was a complete fool for not saying such things to his wife before. And so the couple just sat and talked to each other for a long time. In the evening, the girl's mother came into her room, saying that Lady Garnet was looking for her, saying that she had some business with Helena. Lady Garnet was well acquainted with the Duchess's mother, but they had never even seen her once. On meeting her, the girl at once conveyed an invitation from Viscount Lansfield. Garnet said the man would be glad if the Duchess visited him at the manor. Helena didn't even know who this Viscount was, so she began to ask if the invitation was definitely meant for her. The girl confirmed, for she had to give it to a beautiful lady with long brown hair who lived in Ellerwood. Helena's mother thought it was possible, but she did not understand why such a high-ranking man had invited her daughter to his house. Who was this man to invite a girl he had never seen before? Garnet only heard that the Viscount wanted to thank Helena. The girl asked again, but got the answer that the Duchess had helped him a lot during the festival. The heroine didn't remember doing anything meaningful, but then she realised that she was talking about the man whose handkerchief she had picked up. After hearing this conversation, there was no way Aslan was going to let his wife go to that aristocrat. Helena didn't know the details, but she seemed to understand who the conversation was about. Garnet added that Helena then caught the Viscount's attention. The Duke broke his pencil in anger, and then apologised because he'd misjudged his strength. The girl's mother thought that however grateful the Viscount might have been, it was too much, and he should not have invited the girl to his estate. Garnet told her that it was all excuses, and if the aristocrat had simply wanted to thank Helena, he would have sent a servant to her with money. It seemed to her that the Viscount had fallen in love with the Duchess at first sight. The woman began to say that it was all nonsense. Of course, Helena was incredibly beautiful, and even if the man fell in love, it was not surprising. But they had only seen each other once. Inviting a girl to his home after a single meeting was unwise. Aslan realised that the difference in status was not easy to overcome. When a nobleman started a relationship with a commoner, it was not considered something serious. In any case, the higher one's position, the more one should be judged by others towards one's mate. Even if ordinary people didn't know this unspoken rule, the aristocracy was definitely aware of it. It was one thing to ruin Aslan's life and reputation, but it was another to treat his wife so lightly. The Duke simply couldn't let her go there. Helena briefly said she would not go to the meeting, especially since the Viscount had invited her since he was interested. Garnet still advised the girl to go if it was possible. Viscount Lansfield was not a bad man, and the villagers would not be very happy if they had a misunderstanding with him. Most of the local villagers worked for the Viscount. Helena began to realise that she could not refuse the invitation, for her family could be seriously hurt. The Duchess's mother asked her daughter not to think about it, saying that she didn't have to go to such things because of this trifle. The heroine did not have to worry about her family, and remember that she was free to do whatever she wished. Helena began to think that if Viscount Lansfield really was as good a man as Lady Garnet described him, he would not retaliate for the girl's refusal. However, there was still the problem of public opinion. If the Duchess refused, the woman in front of her would definitely spread the information throughout the village. Everyone would only say that Violet's family had coldly rejected Viscount Lansfield's invitation. The Viscount, on the other hand, was probably really inviting the Duchess simply because he wanted to thank her for her help during the festival. Thinking it over well, Helena decided to go after all, saying that it would be rude to refuse the invitation. Aslan stood up, deciding to go along with the girl to be sure she was safe. 2 days later, the couple travelled to the Viscount's estate. In the end, the Duke decided to go with Helena. As it turned out, the Viscount's mansion and Violet's family home were not far away. The girl wondered why she had not crossed paths with the Viscount before, and for Aslan it was another proof that the man was not such an influential aristocrat. At the entrance of the manor, the nobleman personally greeted the Duchess. Pretending that everything was normal, Aslan said hello, saying that he was happy to meet again. The table was already set, so the man decided to lead the couple straight to the banquet hall. The whole Viscount's family was already gathered at the table. Everyone introduced themselves, after which Helena couldn't believe that all the members of the aristocrat's family would be present. After they had eaten, the Viscount suggested that Aslan step aside for a chat, and if he smoked, they could go straight to the smoking room. The Duke apologised, for he did not smoke, as he could not stand the smell of cigarettes. Hearing this, the aristocrat decided to go and play a little billiards. The Duke reacted to this proposal with special interest, because he liked to play billiards in his free time. On the way to the room, Aslan decided not to stall and get straight to the point. The man realised that the Viscount was just looking for an excuse to discuss something with him alone. The aristocrat was not upset that he had been exposed so quickly, as he really only wanted to ask Aslan one question. He wondered if the Duke loved Lady Ryla very much. During dinner, the man's feelings became even more obvious, for he did not take his eyes off Helena throughout the meal. The Viscount began to say that the girl interested him a lot, but when he saw how Aslan looked at her, he decided to give up his feelings. The Duke said that he really loved Helena, because for him, she was a person who was dearer to him than his own life. The aristocrat thanked the man for his frankness and suggested that they still play a game of billiards, as they had previously planned. The Viscount thought that if Glock's words were true, then Duke Tordel had loved another girl, not Helena, before he lost his memory. It dawned on him that the man had probably not lost his memories completely, but he still wanted to be sure. Now the Viscount's sister had to fulfill her part of the plan. At the festive table, the nobleman's mother decided to leave the feast so the young ladies could chat in peace. Caroline began to say in Polish that Helena had helped his brother, so she was curious to know what kind of person she was. But the Duchess was not what she expected. Diana agreed with her sister, and at that very moment Helena realised that the girls just wanted to mess with her. The girl thought that the Duchess had no higher education, so she must not understand what they were talking about now. The Polish of the two sisters was rather poor. They spoke at about the level of the children the heroine had taught, so she should not have reacted to these ridiculous provocations. The girl didn't know what was the reason for this sudden hostility, but she was already used to such bullying. Diana continued to say that Patriciu was right, and that a person's worth was determined from the moment he or she was born. The sister supported this amazing thought, admiring that Diana was familiar with the works of this author, so she would remember these words. As far as Caroline knew, her sister had also inherited the superior intellect of their kind, so she could become like her. The aristocrats didn't like the fact that Helena's parents worked in the orchard, thinking that they were insignificant and they would never come close to their greatness, so she was sorry. The Duchess didn't care that the girls were making fun of her, but they had no right to talk about her family like that. Then Caroline asked Helena in Polish if she understood what they were just talking about. She wouldn't have been surprised if the Duchess had only gotten her name out of the phrase. Diana agreed with her sister's words, as there was no response. Suddenly, Helena apologised, saying that she understood a lot of things, but hesitated a bit as she decided what to say in response. It was rude to mention someone else's mistakes, however, something the girls were very much mistaken about. The Duchess said that the author of the book Lady Caroline had read was not Patrashu, but Patnigeshu. Also, Patnigeshu's words should be understood without taking them out of context, but the Duchess didn't want to go into details. Diana freaked out as she realised that Helena had just been ignoring them all this time. In the Viscount's study, the men were discussing the world economy. The aristocrat wondered if Aslan worked in trade. The Duke did not give a clear answer, saying that he had something similar. The Viscount understood the man, for he himself also had a small business. The Duke didn't like that they were staying at the manor much longer than he had expected. Aslan suggested to go back to the living room, as it was not good to leave the women for a long time. As they approached the room, the men could feel the atmosphere gradually building up. Aslan approached Helena, saying that she had a slight fever. The Duchess wondered how her husband knew about it. After all, it was a signal for just the two of them. When a girl was ignored at social events, whenever Aslan saw it, he would always take her away under that pretext. Helena wondered if it was a coincidence or if the Duke remembered everything. The girl wanted to ask him about it right now, but there were too many extra ears. The Duchess began to say that everything was fine, but further communication might be difficult for her. Aslan took his wife's hand and ordered her to prepare the carriage as they were returning home. As soon as the couple left, the Viscount began to ask the sisters if everything had gone well, for he could not overhear their conversation from the other room. Diana said that she unconsciously got angry in the middle, but in general, everything went exactly according to plan. At that moment, the aristocrat began to think that Glock's words were true after all. At the moment of their last conversation, the young man had said that every time Helena got into trouble during social events, Aslan would go to her and tell her that she had a slight fever. The man was overjoyed, for all that was left to do was to tell Glock that memories had returned to the Duke. The Viscount was about to flee, but suddenly thought that the young man told him that Aslan did not love his wife, and this was fundamentally different from the words of the Duke himself. The man saw the Duke's look, which could only be that of a deeply loving person, so such feelings could not be played. The aristocrat began to suspect that Glock was mistaken in something, or maybe even just used him for his own purposes. In any case, the Viscount was at a complete loss, because those two obviously loved each other, so much so that he had no chance. A worried Diana began to ask why her brother looked so glum, but he said nothing. The Viscount thought that Aslan was the reason he would be able to surrender, but first he would report the results. Glock read the reports and was already expecting the completion of his plan. Rosalin felt very bad. For all this time she had not had a chance to tell Aslan about Glock's plan. The young man looked at the girl and ordered her to write a letter for the Duke. The next day, Helena rode in the carriage, pondering whether she had made a mistake. The girl could have just accidentally told Aslan about their secret signal. Without thinking long, Helena began to ask the Duke if his memory had returned to him. She wondered since when the man had been lying to her, pretending to have lost his memory, if it amused him. Helena thought that Aslan thought it was funny how the ignorant girl was trying to help him remember everything. The Duke began to say that it wasn't like that, and he didn't want to deceive his wife. It was true that he had lost his memory, but in the time he had spent with her, his memories had come back. Aslan simply had no opportunity to tell Helena about all this. The girl didn't understand her husband, because he could have done it at any moment. If he had just admitted that his memory had come back when they talked about it, she wouldn't have felt so stupid. The Duke wanted to at least try to justify himself, but he couldn't even open his mouth. He had been hiding something all his life. It was dangerous for him to speak openly, and sincerity was a weakness that could turn into a serious threat to you if it was suddenly found out. Politics, economics, history, philosophy and arts, all these disciplines teach you to watch every word you utter, so Aslan could not speak frankly with people. Now the Duke was simply unable to fulfill Helena's request and answer her honestly. The man didn't even try to explain himself. The Duchess began to say that the broken trust was like a broken vase, because everything could be glued together, but the traces still remained, and at any moment it could break again. The couple arrived at the house, where the Duke wished to help his wife out of the carriage, but she simply ignored him. The girl's parents wanted to find out how everything happened, but Helena went to her room, citing her poor health. The girl entered the room and immediately fell on the bed, not wanting to think about anything, because she was very tired. Next, Violet's family decided to ask Aslan about what had happened yesterday. The parents thought that Vicomte had somehow offended their daughter, but the Duke gave no answer. Suddenly the man heard a strange sound, after which he went out the door to check. There was a letter lying on the threshold of the house, so Aslan decided to walk around and examine the area around the house. The letter stated that someone unknown knew the real identity of Helena Laristan. The Duke was furious because he thought that Rosalin Ferido had sent the note. The man had no time to reason, for he had to go to the centre immediately. The girl's parents were greatly surprised by the Duke's sudden departure. Aslan asked not to say anything to Helena that he left so hastily, because he did not want to bother his wife for such trifles. The man didn't understand how Rosalin dared to intimidate him with these ridiculous threats, so he decided to make her pay for it. In the morning, the Duchess was told that Aslan had left because of numerous work-related matters. Yesterday, the girl wanted to apologize for her presumptuous behavior, but she failed and was greatly saddened. The girl's mother began to question her daughter about what happened with the Duke. Helena assured her mother that everything was fine. She was just thinking too narrowly. She thought that Aslan might have mocked her and ignored what the girl didn't have the courage to think seriously about. The woman couldn't be sure, but she thought the Duke didn't seem like the type of man who would laugh at a girl. Helena's mother thought that her daughter was very similar to the Duke, but the girl herself thought that Aslan was too different a person to compare him to her. This degree of comparison was beginning to seem pathetic to the heroine. The woman went on to say that the couple were both overly attentive to others and didn't care for themselves at all. As it seemed to her, the Duke could pretend with everyone else, but towards Helena he was always sincere. Her mother asked her to think about who it was that made them live so well now. Helena didn't believe it all, and assured her it was only a favour from Aslan. The woman began to assure him that the Duke did it because he cared for the girl. If he had just taken pity on them and tried to help them, he would have just given them only a house. But Aslan had continued to take care of them until they settled in this village. The Duke gave Violet's family a garden so they could keep working, sent them letters asking how they were doing and if they had any inconveniences. If the man didn't care for Helena, he wouldn't have been so helpful to strangers. The woman believed that her daughter would change her mind once she read the letters from the Duke. Helena's mother pulled a box out of the cupboard, filled to the top with letters. In one of them, Aslan wrote that when he ate with his wife, he learned that Helena didn't like food with a pungent flavour. Another said that while walking in the garden, the girl looked at the flowers. So next year the Duke planned to decorate the garden with lilacs. Helena had recently taken up embroidery, and Aslan was sorry she had not shown it to the man, though he was very interested. The Duchess knew that her husband sent occasional letters to her family, and she thought they contained only formal greetings. The woman left her daughter alone, saying she could read the letters all she wanted, as long as she didn't tell the Duke that she had shown them to her. Helena thought she knew Aslan well, but it turned out there was a lot she didn't know about him. She didn't understand why the Duke kept it from her. It wasn't that Aslan didn't say it. There was just no way he could say it to the girl. The hesitation to speak honestly about his feelings and the negative representation of another person's feelings makes a person feel afraid, and eventually prefers to avoid that person by not looking him in the eyes. It was said that spouses usually resembled each other, but the girl did not understand how they had become alike at all. Nevertheless, Helena felt that now she would be able to discuss things honestly with Aslan. On the other side of the region, Rosalin was pacing the house in confusion. Then Aslan bursts in the door, after which the girl began to tell about her anxiety, since he had not contacted her for a long time. Rosalin immediately confessed that it was she who had sent the letter, because she really knew the real identity of Helena Laristan. The girl began to talk about the consequences if everyone found out about Ryle, as impersonating a noblewoman was a serious crime, so Helena would likely be in some danger. Aslan wondered where she had gotten this information from, and how she knew his memories had come back. Without all of this, the letter would be meaningless if the memories were not restored. The man was sure that Rosalin would never have been able to think of such a thing on her own, so it was most likely Glock Laristan who helped her. The girl began to say that if the Duke honoured her request, she wouldn't say anything. Aslan wanted to preserve Helena's peaceful life, so he was ready to do anything. Without a drop of doubt, Rosalie said that the man was obliged to marry her, and then she would keep the secret for the rest of her life. The girl believed that such threats would not work on Aslan, but she could not say that Glock had forced her. The man asked Rosalin if she would really tell no one if he made her a duchess. The girl promised to remain silent, after which the Duke, with a horrified face, said that he would determine the date of the wedding himself. He was going to stay for a while, so if Rosalin had anything more to say, she could come to the residence. The Duke left, and the girl fell to the floor, thinking that now the end had come, and she had done it. Now, even if she honestly admitted that Glock had threatened her, it wouldn't help her. Rosalin couldn't believe that Aslan had agreed so obediently, because it simply couldn't happen, and there was clearly something going on here. The man realized that Glock Laristin couldn't go through with this just to make Rosalin a duchess. The young man was probably planning to kill him and take all his possessions after they were married. Aslan just wanted to pretend like everything was going according to their plan and then deal with them. Rosalin came to Glock and told him how she had threatened the Duke that she would tell everyone Helena's secret if he did not marry her, after which he agreed. The young man was delighted because, as expected, Aslan Tordel's weakness was this woman. Everything was going better than Glock had expected. There was only a little bit left, and his plan would come to fruition. Then Aslan Tordel's wealth and power would be in his hands. The young man looked at Rosalin and wondered why she was not excited, for soon she would finally receive the title of Duchess she had dreamed of. The girl thought that if Glock had seen Aslan at that moment, he would not have said such a thing now. Then it seemed to Rosalin that just a little more and the Duke would hit her. The girl should have run away from the young man a long time ago, or better yet, not agreed to his plan at all. Helena spent the whole morning writing a letter. When Aslan returned, the girl needed to have a serious talk with him. The girl's father noticed that his daughter was going somewhere and was curious as to why her mood had improved so much. Helena told him that she was going to the post office to send a letter to her husband, as the accumulated misunderstanding had finally been resolved. A few days later, the letter carrier came to Violet's house to deliver a new issue of the newspaper and a letter addressed to Helena. The young man wondered why the Duke was not there, while the girl said not to worry, for the man had just gone away for a while. The heroine went into the house, gave her father the newspaper, and hurriedly began to unfold a letter from her husband, thinking that he would be back soon. In the message, Aslan said that he was sorry, for he had some urgent business to attend to, so he would not be able to come to Ellerwood soon. The girl's parents began to worry, but Helena excused her husband as he had some difficulties. In a normal situation, the girl would have just waited for Aslan, but now, for some reason, she had a bad feeling. Helena finished reading the letter and announced her trip to the centre. During the report, Aslan thought that his wife was probably still angry with him, and it was natural after all, he had been lying to her all this time. Besides, while they were together, the Duke had shown himself terribly immature, so it was not surprising that the girl was disappointed in him. The Duke's aide began to talk about Glock Laristin, who had recently approached Eston, the head of the Maquette Company, and distant relatives of the Tordel family. All of them were often seen at the Amber House, and the last time they seemed to have spoken was at the estate itself. Judging by the fact that the young man was addressing the very people who disliked existence, Glock Laristin was indeed going to kill Aslan. To some extent, this was expected for the Duke, so he began to ask if the people listed were related to the accident he had gotten into. Aslan ordered an even more thorough investigation of Aston and Glock Laristin. Aston was willing to do anything to make Mexeti the #1 company in his industry, and he considered those who didn't help him in that endeavour useless. Aslan didn't understand why such a man would team up with Glock Laristin, an aristocrat without influence or money. The servant thought there must be a reason why Aston couldn't reject Glock's offer, so they should find out. The servant realised he was prying, but still, the Duke shouldn't have worried so much about his wife, since Gus had stayed there to look after Helena. Judging from the fact that no news had been received, the girl was now in Ellerwood. At that moment, the butler entered Aslan's study, announcing that he had a visitor. A joyful Helena appeared on the threshold of the room, which made the man a little uneasy, not understanding how and why his wife was here. The girl said that she wanted to talk to the Duke about a case, so he should have given her only a couple of minutes. Aslan began to think that the Duchess was finally able to sort out her feelings for him. The couple packed up and headed off somewhere in a carriage. It was a good start for Helena, because she was able to be alone with the Duke, but now she could not say a word. Aslana didn't even look surprised, even though they hadn't seen each other for so long. Suddenly, the Duchess began to ask her husband if he was curious about what she wanted to talk to him about. Aslan was very curious. However, he had to go already. In his letter, the man had mentioned that he had business to take care of, so he had asked the girl to tell him everything when he was done. Helena remembered that the Duke had indeed written about such a thing. The couple climbed out of the carriage and went about their business, while Glock followed closely behind them. An anxious Rosalin paced all over the house, fearing that matters were taking an increasingly serious turn. Glock burst in on her, saying that Helena Laristine had come to the centre and she was now at the Duke's estate. The girl thought that Aslan might have called his wife to him to tell her everything, but that was unlikely. Even when the Duke had brought Rosalin to the mansion the first time, he hadn't said anything to Helena. If the man did decide to share it with her, she still had no way to influence the situation. Glock didn't know why the Duchess was here, but as it happened, they might have a problem. Aslan Tordel shouldn't have given up on getting married because of Helena at any cost, so the young man decided to meet her. Rosalin began to ask him not to harm her, because if the young man did so, the Duke would definitely not sit idly by. Glock said that he would not do such foolishness and left. Lady Feridot was sure that Glock was not one to act quietly, so he would definitely do something to Helena. On the way, the couple came across a jewellery store. Jenna had told the Duchess about it, as they could find a lot of beautiful jewellery in it. To Aslan it all seemed like a treasure hunt, and yet he told his wife that she could buy anything she wanted. Helena liked one beautiful jewellery box that she wanted to buy if the price was reasonable. After looking at the price of the jewellery, Helena changed her mind as she didn't have that kind of money. A man noticed his wife's strange behaviour and went to ask her why she changed her mind about buying one. The girl began to justify that she was not very fond of music boxes, and if she bought it, it would just gather dust on the shelf. After evaluating the circumstances, the Duke decided that this box would be his gift for Helena. The heroine blushed, pretending that she didn't need it, but Aslan still persuaded her. Helena used to think that her husband was just a kind man, but those letters convinced her of the sincerity of his feelings. The couple went outside, where it had just begun to rain. The Duchess realised that by the time they reached the carriage, their clothes would be soaked through. Aslan instantly ran to get an umbrella, leaving his wife confused, for she was not worried about her clothes, but about the Duke's. The rain was getting heavier, but the man was still nowhere to be found. Suddenly Glock approached Helena, which made the girl uncomfortable. The Duchess began to ask why the young man was here. Glock said that everything was obvious, and he just decided to take revenge on his little sister for the fact that she betrayed him and ran away. The Duchess wanted to call for help, but there was no one around because of the pouring rain. The young man begged his sister not to worry, saying that she just needed to do what he said, and everything would be fine with her and with Aslan Tordel. Glock demanded that the girl go very far away, to a place where her husband wouldn't be able to find her. Only Helena realised how Aslan really felt about her. Only she had a chance to finally talk to him, but her plans were immediately ruined. Glock had said that the girl had impersonated another man and had gotten the Emperor's permission to marry her. This was enough to accuse the heroine of deliberately humiliating their ruler. If Helena does not leave the Duke, they will both have to face the court. In such an outcome, Aslan will lose all his wealth and influence he fought for, all because of a girl, just an ordinary commoner. With tears in her eyes, the Duchess promised the young man that she would leave the city. The Duke finally arrived and began to ask what had happened to Helena. At that moment, the heroine told him that she had to leave urgently. Aslan did not understand what it meant and began to ask the girl to return home and discuss everything calmly there. Aslan argued that Helena couldn't leave without sharing at least some details with him. As he sat in the carriage, he couldn't let go of the fact that the Duchess's mood hadn't changed, even though a lot of time had passed. Aslan could not understand what had happened and what news his wife had heard during the few minutes he had been away. The Duke's musings came to the conclusion that all of this was caused by Glock, or Rosalin Feridot, as they could threaten Helena. Everything was very confusing, So the man decided not to jump to conclusions yet, as nothing had been decided yet. The couple walked into the house, where the butler was about to escort the Duchess to her room. Suddenly, Aslano's head became blurred and he lost consciousness and fell to the floor. Everyone immediately stood on their ears and began to look everywhere for a doctor, because they were very worried about the owner of the estate. The doctor examined the Duke and concluded that there was nothing serious, but his body was very exhausted and he needed to recover from overwork and constant sleep deprivation. The butler began to reassure the Duchess, saying that she should not worry about Aslan, because he should just sleep. Helena didn't realize how hard her husband worked, since he was overworked and sleep-deprived. The servant told her that Aslan had been working a lot lately, and that he had been sleeping less than 2 hours a night. The man came back to the centre so suddenly and plunged into work with his head that he hardly ate. The butler couldn't share the details with Helena, but he did say that the Duke was doing all this to protect her. The girl began to think that it was more likely that Glock had said something as unpleasant to her husband as he had said to her today. Aslan was willing to do anything to keep the girl safe, and she almost ran away from him just because she believed in her brother's words. Helena wanted to hear a lot from Aslan, and no less to say in return, so she asked him to wake up soon. By evening, the Duke came to his senses, and the heroine felt relieved. The man immediately apologized for making her worry considerably. The Duchess asked not to worry, for it was probably she who should have apologized. Aslan, with a kind smile, asked his wife to tell him what was troubling her, for he too had wanted to discuss it with her, but had long since put it off. The action shifts to Glock's conversation with Rosalin, where the young man is unhappy about the Duke's recent fall. Glock thought that everything would have turned out differently if Helena had listened to him at once, but now she was definitely not going anywhere, so he should have acted sooner. Rosalin could not stand it, and began to say that she was no longer going to participate in the young man's games. She didn't want to be a duchess anymore, as she didn't like the fact that the young man was dragging her into something terrible. The girl did not want to go where no one knew her, because she wanted to live in peace. Glock did not understand what Rosalin was talking about. He already had a headache, and the girl was bothering him with her hysterics. The young man demanded that Rosalin did not interfere with him, but just did everything he said. Suddenly the girl had a bad idea in her head. She took the nearest vase, swung it around, and hit Glock on the head with it. The young man fell unconscious to the floor, with his head bashed in, bleeding. Rosalin stood in the middle of the room in shock, not knowing what to do about it. Helena began to remind her husband that she had said that broken trust was like a broken vase, and that even if you glued it together, there would still be traces. The girl concluded that she was wrong, because people's feelings, their trust in each other, all this had nothing to do with vases and such. Even if there were cracks, they were just a reminder that they shouldn't make mistakes. What their relationship would be like in the future depended on their actions in the present. That was the reason Helena wanted to talk, because only by talking to each other could they build trust. The girl blushed, because she still wanted to say that she really loved Aslan. For a long time she hid her feelings, avoided the Duke. She was afraid that the man would reject her and she would be terribly hurt. Her fears overwhelmed Helena, so she preferred to deal with them alone. At some point, the Duchess felt that she couldn't take it anymore and ran away. The Duchess began to apologize for leaving Aslan without saying a word, for what she had said to him in a burst of feelings. The Duke wanted to say it was his fault, but the girl didn't need an apology. She thought that if she honestly told the Duke how she felt, he would do the same. The man began to say that he really had lost his memory, and it shocked him, for the Duke was completely confused. With the help of subordinates, Aslan was able to remember what was before his 20th birthday, but that was all. When the Duke was told that Helena was his consort, he immediately went on a search to fill this gap in his memory, and after he met the girl, he realized that he wanted to be near her. The man called it a reasonable decision that he had to make in order to get his memories back. In truth, it was just a ridiculous excuse. The Duke didn't remember Helena, but subconsciously he was obsessed with the idea that he couldn't leave her. The longer Aslan was with the girl, the more images appeared in his mind, but he continued to keep silent. The Duke thought the heroine would leave him if he said the memories came back. The girl became curious to know if what the Duke had done so far was just to see her reaction or not. The man began to assert that in no way had he done that to his wife. Aslan had dared to do so for a long time, and all this time he had simply kept it hidden, afraid of disappointing the girl. After losing his memory and spending so much time with Helena, the Duke realized that he could not resist his desire. The man wanted them to become real spouses because he loved the heroine. Both of them became very uncomfortable, but then the girl began to wonder if she should tell her husband about the conversation with Glock. Helena did not want Aslan to worry about her, and if she hid it, nothing was going to change anyway. That's when the heroine remembered that she herself wanted to be honest with each other. Helena began to say that today Glock Lariston came to her and told her to leave the Duke. Otherwise, the young man promised to tell everyone that the girl pretended to be an aristocrat and insulted the emperor himself. The Duke was angry because it was not enough for Glock to bother him, so he decided to deal with Helena. The man asked not to worry about everything. Helena was worried because if Glock really arranged all this, it would not be easy to solve such a problem. Suddenly, a worried butler knocked on the door, saying that an unexpected guest had arrived at Aslan's place, and the man should have come out after all. Rosalin demanded to be released immediately, as she had to meet the Duke immediately. Aslan immediately ordered to take the girl away, and if she continued to break free, just call the knights. Lady Feridot still broke through to the man, and he decided to call the knights immediately. Rosalin fell to her knees and began to apologize, saying that Glock Laristan had threatened her. She finally escaped him, but she did not know when he would come for her again. Feridot told the couple what Glock was up to. By threatening to reveal Helena's secret, the young man planned to force Aslan to marry Rosalin. In addition, Glock contacted the Duke's main competitor, the head of the company, Mekchet, and together with him, wanted to bring both Helena and Aslan to trial to tarnish their reputation, by the time Rosalin was already pregnant, and other relatives Tordel, deprived the Duke of the title of head of the family as a criminal. Glock ultimately wanted to kill the man, disguising the whole thing as an accident. Rosalin continued to claim that the young man wanted to use her status as a duchess to take possession of Aslan's and the Tordel family's property. The girl admitted that at first she gave in to the tempting speeches, but then she realized how wrong she was. Rosalin wanted to leave Glock a great number of times, but the young man threatened that he would reveal her secret if she betrayed him. The girl was terribly afraid of Glock, and so she did the wrong thing. Aslan wondered why Lady Feridot was only now realizing everything. He began to think that Rosalin was only asking for forgiveness to save her life. Aslan thought that all these were just empty excuses, and she should not be believed. Helena began to ask her husband to think about his actions for a while. Glock Lariston knew how to manipulate people using their weaknesses. The Duchess knew this for sure, as the young man had been bullying her for a long time. In the Duchess's opinion, if Rosalin had feelings for Glock, she wouldn't have run away from him so easily. If the young man had really blackmailed the girl into helping him, Helena didn't think Rosalin deserved the same punishment as him. None of this meant that the Duchess would forgive the girl for helping Glock. The man did not, though, agree with Helena. Aslan asked the girl to go rest while he talked to Rosalin. The Duke began to say that Lady Feridot was very lucky today, because in any other situation, he would have killed her for her complicity with Glock Lariston. A man could not do that to a person whom he had threatened and who himself had come to them to ask for forgiveness. Aslan promised to keep Rosalin alive if she would help him in the future. The girl again fell at the man's feet thanking him, but he did not want to hear it because Rosalin was saved not by him, but by his wife. The Duke returned to his wife's room and informed her that the girl would cooperate with him from now on. The man was sure that Rosalie would be able to provide them with much more information in the future. After these words, Helena began to think that Glock Lariston could have done something else. The Duke assured his wife that she had nothing to worry about, as he would make sure she was not affected in any way. A few days later, Glock sat in the tavern, pondering how Rosalin Feridot had dared to betray him. The girl's departure had ruined all his plans. He had to get Rosalin back somehow, but the manor was now guarded by many knights. Glock was resigned to his loss, for he still had a chance to get rid of Tordell, for he had the Duke's relatives and Aston on his side. Suddenly, the young man overheard a conversation that said that the head of the maquette had claimed Duke Tordell, and a trial would soon be held. Glock became furious, calling the aristocrat short-sighted, as he could ruin everything in the blink of an eye. A few days later, a court meeting was held with a huge number of people in attendance. Helena was very nervous, so Aslan tried his best to calm her down. The action returns a few days before the trial. Glock had come to Eston's house because he had heard the strange news that a man had brought charges against Aslan Tordell and his wife. The aristocrat promised the young man that he would only do all this after the Duke had remarried. Aston began to talk about the necessity of these actions, as Aslan wanted to pin the carriage accident on him. Just recently, a girl came to the man and said that the Duke wanted to inform him that he would blame him for the accident that had happened to him near the station. Aston didn't know how that girl had found out, but if it came out, it would be the end of him. It suddenly dawned on him that not many people knew about the aristocrat's communion, so he began to blame Glock. The young man could have done something similar, but it was better for both of them to have Aston accuse the Duke than Glock accuse him. Glock began to say that it was Aston who had chosen the wrong time, and now all their plans were ruined. If Aslan's secret was revealed now, the Duke's marriage to Rosalin would no longer make sense. The young man needed this marriage because it was very important to him. At that time, Helena was in her room, thinking that nothing had changed in it, although she had left the centre long ago. Suddenly Aslan came into the room. He wanted to know how she was sleeping, and there was news from Ellerwood, where the Duchess's family asked him to tell her that everything was fine. They also told Aslan to take care of the girl during her stay at the centre, so he came to ask how she was doing. The Duke remembered the letter addressed to Helena personally. It had happened sooner than the man had expected. Earlier, Aslan had already thought that the girl could be sued. Even though Rosalin betrayed Glock Lorestian, the heroine could still harm Glock's plans. The Duke asked his wife not to worry, as the matter had already been settled before their wedding, so she would not be punished for anything. At the moment, Helena knew that everything would be all right, but she was still not comfortable in court. The judge announced that in order for them to get justice, he would ask everyone to take this case seriously, then gave the prosecutor the floor. The prosecutor began to read out that on the 27th, Aston had slandered the Duchess of Tordell in his statement. The man accused the girl of deceiving His Majesty the Emperor and maliciously lying against the noble lady. Aston began to say that he had simply confessed to His Majesty, for he could no longer conceal this truth, which he had learned by chance. Aston claimed that Helena had concealed a crime that she herself had committed. The prosecutor asked the man to be more specific about the charge. The man couldn't take it anymore and shouted that the Duchess of Tordell sitting there had never been Helena Laristan, and that the real Helena had died long ago. The aristocrat said that Helena was a commoner who had been brought into his home as a child by Count Loristan. For a long time, the girl served as a substitute for the real Helena Laristan and deceived everyone. During the wedding ceremony, Helena lied, so she offended the god himself with this act. The Duchess could hardly contain herself, as Aslan told her not to do anything under any circumstances, so she had to believe him. Then the judge invited the first witness, who shocked the heroine, because she thought she would never see him again. The judge asked if the witness would swear to tell only the truth, and to be punished for perjury. The man swore, and then began to say that he had worked for Earl Lorestian for many years, and had caught the time when the real Lady Helena was born. Unfortunately, the girl died when she was still a toddler. Everyone in the Earl's house was deeply saddened, and the lady whose heart appeared to be broken at some point began to believe that the late Lady Helena was alive. The Earl did his best to cure her, but no matter what he did, the heart ailment would not go away. One day the Earl returned to the mansion with a girl who looked like Lady Helena. He brought her, not wanting to see the lady suffer, and the poor woman thinking it was really her daughter. The prosecutor wondered what the witness meant by the Count bringing the girl, and if it meant that Count Loristan had taken Helena in a legal way. The man hesitantly confirmed the words, but he had heard that the girl's parents had been paid for it. The judge began to think that the man was claiming that Count Lorestan had bought the child, but the man began to justify himself, saying that the girl had been hired as an actress. For the sake of his mistress, the Count had asked Helena to pretend to be their daughter and had paid generously for it. The witness began to point at the Duchess, wanting to be questioned personally because the Count had brought her up as his real daughter, but she did not know the basics, pretended to be Lady Helena, and betrayed the Count by seducing a stranger. The girl became uncomfortable, but the Duke put his hand on her and began to quietly soothe her. The judge released the witness, after which Aslan decided to act as his wife's defence. As a representative of the Tordell family and a close friend of Helena's, he completely refuted the witness's testimony. The Duke swore in holy court that his wife was Helena Larestin, daughter of the late Count. Aston started shouting, saying that Aslan's words were lies. The Duke was ready to provide evidence to back up his words. The man pulled out a legal document that the Countess had prepared to officially include his wife in their family tree until the Count's death. Thanks to the date on the paper, they could realise that at the time of the marriage, the Duchess was already the legal daughter of the Lorestan family. Aston protested, thinking that Helena had forged the documents to marry Duke Tordell. The judge could not stand it and asked the defendant to refrain from making absurd statements about the plaintiff. The Duke went on to say that the Count and his wife had really wanted to take his wife into the family earlier, but unfortunately, the Countess of Larestin had died shortly before the adoption, and because of this, the case had been postponed. As time passed, Helena became of age, and the Count tried to complete the adoption process, but he failed. Then the fate of the girl brought her together with Aslan. Although Count Larestan at first did not approve of all this, because of the lack of necessary formalities, in the end he allowed the marriage to take place. During the preparations for the wedding, the Count was concerned that lady status might be an obstacle and decided to close the adoption, albeit a little late. Shortly before all of this, Aslan told his wife that on the papers she was indeed the daughter of Count Larestian. The Duke had convinced the Earl to adopt Helena before the wedding, but had kept the fact from her, for she, who had a real family, would probably have been shocked by it. Aston began to cry out that there was some strange situation with the girl's name. It was not clear to him why, if the Earl had officially adopted Helena, he had given her the name of his dead daughter. The Count had to use Helena's real name, and the lack of it said the documents were fake. Aslan said there was a reason for that too. His wife's name was that of the Count's deceased daughter by Lady Larestin herself. Countess Larestan was preparing for adoption during his lifetime, and was afraid that the origin of his wife would become known in secular circles. In order that Helena, being a commoner, would not feel uncomfortable in high society, the Count and Countess decided to give her the name of their biological daughter. In support of his testimony, Aslan was prepared to produce the adoption papers written by Count Lorestan and the will drawn up by Countess Lorestan. According to this will, the Countess was giving her entire inheritance to Helena. If the deceased did not regard the girl as her daughter, she would not have done such a thing. The judge was satisfied that the documents were genuine, for they bore the coat of arms and the signatures of the Count and his wife. Later, the court could have required a more thorough examination, but for the moment, it accepted the evidence presented by the plaintiff. Here, Herzog reminded the court that Aston owned a railroad business. The defendant's company, Mechjet, competed with Tordell for access to the western branch of the route, so Aslan could believe that the defendant had slandered Helena for personal gain. Aston began to say that these accusations were irrelevant. The judge agreed with the defendant, asking the Duke to refrain from making any statements that might defame the man's honour. Duke apologised and began to describe how he had come to such conclusions. Aslan Tordell wanted to inform the court about other crimes of the defendant Eston Huberty. The man reminded everyone of the recent accident near the train station in which he had personally suffered. During the proceedings, it was revealed that it was Eston, the president of Mechjet, who had secretly ordered it to be set up. Once Aslan was convinced that the defendant was the culprit, he began to gather direct evidence of his involvement. Now the Duke had not only them, but also witnesses who could corroborate his words. Aston realised that it was over, and he needed to stop everything while he had the chance. The man confirmed the words of Aslan Tordel, saying that he was not the only one involved in the case. The real culprits were distant relatives of the Tordel family, and Eston had been forced to join because he was being blackmailed. The judge interrupted the man's story, saying that he was ready to pass sentence. Defendant Aston Huberty seriously damaged the reputation of the Duke and Duchess of Tordel by slandering them. There was also a serious charge of solicitation to murder. The defendant lacked remorse and was only willing to blame everything on the plaintiff in order to cover up his acts. Since libel was among the crimes of desecrating the name of the imperial family, the defendant, Aston Huberty, was sentenced to 200 years in prison, including hours of reformatory labour. The entire courtroom was shocked at such a strict sentence. The next day, there was a sensation in all the newspapers. Be that as it may, all the articles did not change the fact that the Duchess of Tordel was a commoner. For aristocrats, lineage was more important than anything else, so both the Count and the Duchess could be understood, because they simply did not want to publicise Helena's origins. The Duchess was relieved because she was afraid of what the people she had lied to for so many years about who she really was would say. Aslan assured his wife that time would pass, and people would only remember Aston Huberty's crimes. The man was overjoyed that he could finally call the girl Ryla Violet. It's been a few days since the trial ended. Without its owner, Eston Huberty's company was in chaos. The Tordel company, in turn, easily took over the entire western branch and expanded by absorbing Maquette. Helena began to write to her family that she would be visiting them very soon. Unexpectedly, the Duke came into the girl's room to say hello. The man began to ask if Helena was thinking of starting to use her real name. The girl was not against this venture, but she had enough of one scandal, so she was afraid that her husband's reputation might suffer because of gossip. Aslan understood what was troubling his wife, but he felt it was worth starting now, while people were interested. Now that everyone knew that Helena had been living under a different name because of the Count and his wife, she had the right to say that she wished to be Ryla again. Even if they didn't believe her, the Duke promised to help her in any case. Ryla was happy that her husband Aslan was aware of such matters. Just then, the man asked if the heroine would like to move the family to the centre. If she put the Amber House in order, her relatives could live there in complete comfort. Ryla said that she would be happy to see her family every day, and then apologised for inconveniencing her husband too much. Aslan hugged the girl and asked her not to say that, but if she was truly sorry, he asked her to make sure to repay him. A confused Ryla wondered what the Duke wanted as payment, but the man told the girl to decide for herself, for he just wanted his wife to think of him so they could be happy and spend the rest of their lives together. On this day, the Duchess's family waited a very long time for the arrival of the carriage with the couple. As soon as Ryla arrived, her mother immediately began to praise her for her success in court. The woman began to thank Aslan, wanting to do something for him. The man asked her not to even think about such things, because he had only done what he had to do. The Duchess's family was already ready to leave for the capital. They were all very happy that they would be able to live near Ryla and spend more time with her without expecting trouble. At that moment, Aslan decided to see if his wife wanted to say goodbye to the people of Elowood. He was sure the girl had grown attached to many of them, which was why he duked it out and thought it was okay to stay for a couple days and say goodbye to everyone. Ryla had met so many good people in this settlement that she just couldn't leave without saying goodbye to them. The next day, the girl went to Pastor to thank him for lending her books and introducing her to the children. The man was sure that this meeting was a gift sent to him by God, but he feared that the little ones could not live a day without their beloved Ryla. All the children approached the girl and began to beg their teacher not to leave. Ryla assured the students that they were not parting forever and she would definitely visit them. Little Jody began to ask the Duchess if she and Aslan were husband and wife. Helena wondered why the girl thought that. Jody couldn't tell, as Aslan told her to keep it a secret, but she still decided to share with the teacher that the Duke had told her that they were husband and wife. That's when one of the girl's students ran up and with tears started saying that the teacher should marry him and not the Duke. Helena's name change had gone smoothly so far. After the procedure was completed, it was advisable to return to the centre, to keep a close eye on the spreading of bad rumours. Aslan ordered him to report to him immediately if any newspaper decided to write an article about it. Before the Duke returned to the centre, everything had to be prepared in the best possible way. While they talked quietly, Glock was under surveillance, and if all went according to plan, he would meet Rosalin today and receive an offer he could not refuse. Aslan was angry and said that the young man would pay severely for all the pain he had caused his wife. At this time, Glock was hiding from the Duke's men all over the city. The young man took out the letter and began to rejoice that he had not gotten rid of Rosalin at once, for as it turned out she was still useful. Although Glock did not even threaten her, but the girl again ran with her money right into his hands. A few days later, the young man showed up at the agreed place for a meeting, but instead of Rosalin, 2 unknown men showed up. Glock began to shout at the men, saying that they would be sorry. The guards explained to the young man that he still did not realize the situation he was in. The man said that it would be a fitting end for Glock to meet his death without getting answers to his questions. The guard drew his sword and killed the young man, leaving his body in a dark alley. The same day, Aslan was informed about the successful operation, for which he was very grateful. The Duke had known where Glock Lariston was hiding for a long time, but he had been waiting for the right moment to deal with Eston Huberty and his relatives, who were sick of Aslan's mere existence. After a short ride, the man easily reached for Ryla and began to apologize for keeping her waiting, as he needed to finish his preparations. Instead of waiting for the right time, Duke should have thought of a way to put the girl out of her misery caused by Glock, which was why he did all this. Aslan had brought the girl's entire family to his estate, where Ryla was going to help her parents unpack, since they were not yet familiar with the layout of the Amber House. The man forgave not to worry, because he had assigned them some helpers long ago. Aslan needed to say something to Ryla now, so he asked her for a moment. In the room, the Duke told her that Glock Lariston was dead. The girl began to question if her husband had a hand in the case. She wasn't asking him to criticize him, she was just worried that Aslan might have gotten into trouble. The man thought that Ryla must be scared, or even terrified, but she was fine. Even though Glock was still her family, the girl felt like she was free from the oppressive relationship, so she asked the Duke not to regret it, because no matter what he did, she would always support him. It became known to Ryla that Rosalin didn't know anything yet, so she thought it was better for her to tell everything, because she too had suffered from this man's intrigues. The girl hoped that everything would go well, because it was thanks to Rosalin's help that they were able to get rid of Glock. After the girl was told everything, she was terrified. Ryla said that Glock was dead, and Rosalin was no longer threatened, so she could stay at the Duke's estate. The girl began to refuse, as she did not want to take advantage of the kindness of the spouses. Rosalin was truly grateful that the Tordell family had forgiven her for her transgressions. She thought that if it hadn't been for Ryla, she would have been dead long ago, but she had to be careful to avoid Glock's fate. To do so, she had to find a quiet place to hide. Rosalin had no family, no friends, and no reason to stay at the Tordell house anyway. She had no intention of returning to Ferrydod Manor, because it held too many memories she didn't want to stir up. The Duchess wondered where Rosalin would go, to which the girl replied that she would go anywhere, as long as it was away from this and her homeland. Ryla said that if there was anything she could do to help the girl, she just needed to let her know at any time. Rosalin has had a hard time, and a lot has happened in that time, but Duchess really wanted to say this to her, since she too had suffered through Glock's fault. The girl cried thanks to Ryle, saying that she would never forget what the heroine had done for her. The Duchess had once hated Rosalin intensely, but now she felt sorry for her, so she wanted things to get better for her. After Rosalin left the mansion, the days were unusually quiet. The couple sat in the study and sorted out the business affairs. Suddenly, Ryla became worried about the Duke because he had turned very pale. Aslan did not bother his wife, so he answered that everything was fine and he was just dealing with work issues, and now he just thought about the answer. The Duchess could only speculate what kind of letter could have knocked the man out. The next morning, Jenna visited Ryla, and then the girl began to find out where the maid had disappeared, for the Duchess had been all over the estate, but it was as if she had vanished. Jenna told her that she had been living in her hometown for a while. Soon after Rila left, she stopped working at the Tordell house. As soon as the maid heard that the girl had returned, Jenna immediately decided to move back to the manor. The maid approached Aslan, and he did not refuse her. Rila began to thank the girl, as she had no idea how happy she was to have Jenna. The joyful girl promised to do her best to make up for lost time. Thanks to that, she would gladly continue to serve the Duchess of Tordell. Rila was just about to take a walk, so she asked the maid to help her get ready to go out. Jenna spent a long time dressing up the Duchess, after which she started to look enchanting. Everything was very beautiful, but the girl didn't like that the jewellery looked a little flashy, because she just wanted to spend time with her family. The girl's impatient brother had been looking for his sister for hours. The girl's mother asked the young man to be more patient, as there was still a lot of time left before the appointed hour. The young man could not understand the meaning of his mother's words, as she and his father had gone out much earlier than he did. As soon as Rila came to her family, no one recognized her, for she looked very beautiful. The girl's father began to say that such beauty made him speechless, because she looked like a queen from a fairy tale. The Duchess began to think that the image was too bright, so she should have asked Jenna to remove some jewellery. Ryla's mother began to prove that they were saying all of this sincerely, wondering if they deserved such a beautiful and precious daughter. The Duchess asked the woman not to say that. After all, it was her family that made her this way. Her parents brought up the girl correctly and were always there for her. Just thinking about them helped her through all the hardships. Everyone cried, and the woman acknowledged that her daughter had become very mature and apologized that they had forgotten how she felt. Rayla offered as an apology to have fun, as there were many places in the center where the girl was eager to take her family. Violet's family went around all the sights of the capital, after which Ryla decided to sit down and rest for a while. The Duchess wanted to show her parents only the best, so she was glad that the savings came in handy. The girl's mother began to thank her daughter for the gifted impressions. Some of the grateful ladies didn't understand why Rayla wasn't ashamed to be there. They had certainly heard that commoners tried to emulate aristocrats, but this was too much. Another girl was in complete agreement with the first one, as the Duchess was not shy at all and forgot about her origins. Ryla's mother wanted to keep her daughter away from such discussions, so she asked her to go out and get some fresh air together. The head of Violet's family was very surprised by the splendour of the capital. He had been there before, but he hadn't even noticed that the centre was so huge. All the way, the Duchess hoped that her mother was not hurt by the words of those ladies. The woman began to say that they were happy to spend time with their daughter, but she was worried that socializing with them might cause resentment from high society. Ryla had suffered so much, so they didn't want family to be a stumbling block for the girl. The girl's mother thought that in order for the aristocracy not to look down on the Duchess, they should have returned to Ellerwood. All members of the family began to reject the woman's words. The girl's brother didn't want to go anywhere, and Ryla's father began to say that even though he wasn't a strong man, he could easily handle 3 impudent noblewomen. The Duchess laughed, for Aidan was right, and regardless of her background, she was now a noblewoman. Those who looked down on the girl simply lived by a different standard, which meant Ryla should have paid them no attention. But if anyone disrespected the Duchess's family, she would have to respond appropriately. Rila was no longer the self-conscious Helena Lariston she used to be. She decided to live as Rila Tordell, who could protect the people she cared about and defend her name. For all of this, she needed to further enhance her status. To keep her Duchess parents from worrying, she decided to live as a true Duchess from now on. A few days later, Ryla knocked on Dalton's door with some business for the man to help her. The butler was surprised that the girl wanted to be trained in housekeeping. The girl thought it was time to begin the duties of a Duchess. Of course, she realised that she was hardly trustworthy, so most likely Aslan would not let her do it. Dalton asked Rila not to say that, for she was more trustworthy than anyone else. According to the butler, Aslan was reluctant to let the matter be dealt with out of noble intentions, for he feared that the girl might have harmed her health. The Duchess laughed as she realised that there had been a misunderstanding. The girl began to say that if that was the only problem, then they should not have worried, because her body had become much stronger during her stay in Ellerwood. Dalton didn't know what to do because Aslan had strictly ordered him not to train the girl. On the whole, he would have no trouble telling Raela the basics of running the estate, so he decided to teach her from the next day. The next day, the Duchess began her training, listening to Dalton's instructions on how to run the estate. Walking with the butler through the corridors of the manor, the girl said that at this rate they didn't have enough budget to cover all the expenses, so they needed to review it. Dalton argued that it wasn't necessary, because they needed to check the ledger for last year first. Unexpectedly, Aslan met them not far from his office. The man became jealous and thought that the training process should be much more rigorous. All Dalton had to do was pass on the right information. Raela noticed the Duke while he reassured himself that Raela was his wife and Dalton was his loyal servant. A man should never doubt those he trusted most. Here the Duke evaluated the butler and realized that he was single, attractive, skillful, and also single. This made Aslan turn very pale, beginning to feel even more jealous than he had before. Dalton apologized as he still had work that needed urgent attention, so he should go. The Duchess asked not to apologize, as she was the one who had gotten carried away and taken up too much of his time. The butler hurriedly left before the Duke gave him a glare. A few days later, Aslan joined Dalton's class, saying that the office where they were studying was the only place where he could rest in peace. Butler became worried, going on to say that in this way, all the examples demonstrated good reason for dismissing staff. The next chapter told what disciplinary action was to be taken in such cases. Dalton couldn't stand it any longer and asked the girl to leave so that he could discuss something with the Duke. The butler began to ask what had happened, for Aslan always behaved strangely when he became overly vigilant. The Duke asked not to talk nonsense, for he had simply decided to inquire about the lessons. Suddenly Aslan began to ask what the butler thought about marriage, for it seemed to him that the time had come for Dalton to pay attention to the matter. The man then asked the servant to describe the girl he would like to take as his wife. The butler was seriously worried, because before, the Duke didn't care if he ever got married or not. Aslan was a quiet man by nature, but when it came to Raela, he took everything too personally. After a little thought, Dalton said he knew what the man was worried about. The butler began to assure him that, no matter what, his loyalty to the Tordell family would always remain paramount. Dalton promised that, as before, he would remain a loyal servant and always would be. Aslan agreed with the man, saying that he had worried for nothing. Somewhere on the outskirts of the city, a man came to the Duke's mother, worried that the woman had been suffering from a cough for days. The servant offered to send a letter to Aslan, but the woman was unwilling to do so. Grace kept reminiscing about how a young girl had taken care of her. She was not from around here, and she made the Duke's mother feel as if they had known each other for a long time. The woman could not remember where she had seen her, while the minister suggested that the unknown girl might have been from a neighbouring village. Grace tried to describe her, saying she had brown hair and pale skin, with sadness in her eyes. Today's lesson with Dalton was over, after which Raela wanted to go to her room, but near the door, Aslan was waiting for her, who wanted to invite the girl to a place. Thinking that the man was proposing to go on a date, the Duchess agreed without a second thought. After Raela learned that Aslan wanted to go to the trading house, the girl did not understand why he decided so, because the upper class did not like to appear in such crowded places. The Duke added that he was still thinking of opening a trading business, so he wanted to assess the market conditions. If there were hotels and other high-traffic stores nearby, he thought there would be no shortage of customers. But since he didn't know much about this area, Aslan would be very grateful to the girl if she shared her knowledge. Raela ran off to get ready to leave, while the Duke thought he should know about his spouse's preferences, as he could gift things that pleased the girl. At the trading house, the Duchess was quite tired, as her husband asked her to measure too many things. The girl began to shout at Aslan not to buy everything, because he had already spent a lot. The Duke didn't think it was expensive to buy what his wife liked. Raela remembered her husband's habit of buying everything he liked. To justify himself somehow, the man began to say that it was all part of his analysis. Women made up the main customer base of the trading houses, And with Raila's help, Aslan could figure out which areas and products the female customers liked the most. Demand played a big part in the success of a business, so now the girl was giving him some very useful business advice. The Duke offered to buy all the things as a sample of what other female customers might like, and then asked the seller to calculate them. The girl said she didn't need that much, but Aslan didn't listen to her. Suddenly, the ladies of noble blood noticed the spouses of Tordel, and were greatly surprised, because they had heard that the couple disliked each other. A few days later, the Duchess received many invitations. Dalton suggested that the rumour that the family union had been renewed spread rapidly. In the 3 years Helena had been Duchess, she had never received so many invitations. As soon as everyone realised that Rayla and Aslan had established a relationship, their goals became clear. As much as the Duchess wanted to stay home, she couldn't just ignore the letters. Dalton added that Aslan had asked him to tell the girl that if she didn't wish to go, there was no need to answer the letters either. Rayla was glad that her husband had been very considerate and had even anticipated the pressure she would feel. The Duchess thought it was still rude to answer letters with a refusal, so she decided to ask the butler what was the best place for her to visit. Though Rayla thought it was right to visit as many places as possible, they had to be families that were friendly to Aslan and her. After briefly thinking, Dalton offered 5 options, saying that it was better for the girl to discuss the matter personally with the Duke. Rayla agreed, saying that she would ask Aslan which of these letters was better to accept. Right now, Aslan was busy, so the heroine decided to leave the matter until the evening. Late that night, the Duchess came to the man's house to discuss the invitations. The couple sat on the bed, while Aslan felt uneasy since Rayla was in his room at such a late hour. After a little thought, the man made his choice. The girl was glad, as her views coincided with those of her husband, so she finally decided that next week they would visit Gingerwell Manor. The confused Aslan could not refute the girl's suggestion, so he agreed with her. At the convent, the woman had asked Grace not to beat herself up, but she hadn't listened, saying it was all right and she should just get some rest. The Duke's mother's bed was covered in blood. The woman thought that she did not have much time left. She would soon leave this world and would not bother her son anymore. The next day, Rayla realised she hadn't been to a social event in a while, so she hoped it would go well. Suddenly, Jenna announced that the Duchess had a guest. The girl didn't know who might have come to see her, so she thought it was someone from the family. Madame Brust, the owner of a famous dress boutique, asked for a personal meeting with the girl. Rayla couldn't believe it, because Brust's design services were in high demand in the highest circles. Her name was known throughout the empire, and sometimes even the most noble ladies had a hard time getting in to see her. Dalton remembered that he had forgotten to inform the Duchess that Madame Brust wanted to consult on the girl's dress, so she had decided to pay her a personal visit. Rayla had never commented on the new dress, and it seemed that Aslan had decided to take care of his wife's reputation in aristocratic society. Jenna asked the girl to go, but she resisted because she still had some work to do. The butler assured her that everything was fine. It was his fault that he hadn't warned the Duchess in advance, and she couldn't adjust her schedule, so he would finish everything himself. The heroine was very surprised at Madame Brust's appearance. The girl introduced herself, saying that it was a great honour for her to meet the beautiful Duchess of Tordel. The fashion designer had prepared some options for Rayla in advance, but if she had any special requests, the girl was happy to listen to them. Rayla revealed that she had no particular wishes, so she would choose an outfit from the catalogue based on style and mood. All of Brust's designs were very popular in the capital, but the Duchess desired a more elegant style. Madame Brust became nervous, for she thought the girl did not like her work. The Duchess began to call the works of the fashion designer very refined and sensual, but she still felt that she personally would not be suitable for such a thing. Brust showed the girl a catalogue with the most popular models of the season, but still she should have started with another. The fashion designer asked to bring her long-standing blanks. It was quite an ambitious project, and for a long time this dress had not found an owner. Although it was a little different from the current trend, Brust believed it would emphasise the elegance that the Duchess was looking for. As soon as Rayla looked at the sketches of the dress, she immediately decided that this was the one she would take. The fashion designer quickly took the measurements and told her that she would have to cut some parts, especially in the waist. but the dress wouldn't take long to make because she already had the pattern. The Duchess became concerned because she had not yet submitted her application, nor had she paid in advance. Bruce said that everything was already paid, including the deposit and the cost of consumables. She realized from Rila's eyes that she didn't know anything yet. Just recently, Aslan summoned Madame Brust for a private meeting. The Duke decided to order a dress for his spouse. This was unexpected for the girl, as she had heard that the Duchess of Tordel rarely appeared in social circles. Brust began to ask if his wife had any favourite style or design of dress. Without hesitation, Aslan said that absolutely everything suited his wife. Madame Brust was astonished to think that she had overheard. She could not believe that the Duke of Tordel, known for his harshness and callousness, had said something like that. The Duke had asked not to worry about the budget, but just to make the most beautiful and luxurious dress. Aslan thought that his wife would be beautiful in whatever she wore. In addition, the man wanted to make the dress without Rila's participation because he knew roughly her measurements. Madame Brust said that in such a case it would be difficult to make a good dress. Besides, she wanted to hear the personal wishes of the girl. For some reason, the Duke could not invite the girl right away, and as the order was not an easy one, he gave payment in advance, saying that if his wife was delighted with the dress, he would pay double. Madame Brust could not miss such easy money, so she agreed at once. Presently, Rila realized that Aslan had ordered and paid for the dress back in the spring, and the fashion designer had sewn everything according to his wishes. Besides, Brust knew in advance what the girl would choose. The Duchess was very pleased that the man picked up her dress, because she then thought that he had an affair with Rosalin. Rila had to apologize, as Aslan had gone to great lengths to please her. After that, the girl went to the Duke to tell the news about Madame Brust's visit. The Duchess began to ask if it was true that the man had ordered the tailoring of a dress for her. The embarrassed Aslan was going to make a surprise, but since his wife knew everything, he decided to confess everything. The Duke had said that modesty, of course, made a noble woman beautiful, but one had to be careful, and considering the cost of maintaining a girl's dignity in aristocratic society, the man thought that Rila could spend even more. The Duchess thanked her husband, for she had been wondering what to wear to the party, but now, thanks to Aslan, the problem was solved. Rila didn't notice that when the man heard the simple words of gratitude, his heart melted. Early the next morning, the servants of the manor were greatly surprised. As it turned out, many boxes had been delivered that morning, and they said they were all gifts from Aslan. The delivery man assured her that everything had been paid for long ago, and Rila only had to acknowledge receipt of the goods by signing her name. The girl embarrassedly began to resent that her husband would never learn to use moderation. At the Tordel mansion, on the eve of the visit to Gingerwell's house, the couple were getting ready for a meeting. The beauty of Rila's dress made the man stunned, saying that it really suited her very well. On the way to the carriage, the Duchess noticed that they looked more like a couple now than before. Aslan was upset, thinking that if he hadn't offered to escort his wife, they might not have looked like a couple. The girl began to argue that she didn't mean that, and of course they would look like one. Aslan somehow understood what Rila meant, and began to think that they could rightfully be considered a real married couple if they did that more often, whereupon the man leaned over and kissed the Duchess. The girl became embarrassed and began to ask why the Duke had done it so suddenly. At the visit, as Rila thought, she was very awkward without Aslan, so it was worth choosing an invitation to a reception where the Duke could join her. This was where the girl decided to stop running away forever, for she needed to learn how to act on her own. The Duchess had to get through this and overcome her fears for the sake of her beloved family and Aslan. As soon as Rila entered the manor, she was immediately greeted by a noblewoman who began to say that she was honoured to have a guest like her. As the invitation said, they would spend tonight in a circle of noble ladies, having fun and frank conversations. The Duchess began to think that it was not in vain that she had visited Gingerwell Manor, for she wondered if the other girls would be as friendly to her as the lady of the manor. Rila approached the ladies, eager to join the conversation. The girls were surprised by the appearance of Duke Tordel's consort. One of the noblewomen had attended many events recently, but she had never seen the Duchess at any of them, so she was honoured to meet her.